fam, I just wanted to quickly announce that I've joined forces with an awesome merch company called Sanctified Supply Co. They're a whole Bible-believing company with a mission of spreading their conversation-starting products all across the plane of God's green earth. As you can see, I'm wearing a "We Must Hang on His Words" tee. All of their apparel is personally screen printed in their mom and pop shop in the good old US of A. So if you'd like to support my ministry and their company, head on over to sanctifiedsupplyco.com and toss one of these t-shirts into your cart. Type in Ken10 at checkout and save 10% on your entire order. Check the link in this video's description for quick access. Hello friends, welcome back. I know it's been a little while, but we're back in the hot seat today, and I have a pretty awesome guest on. Not gonna lie, I've been looking forward to talking to this individual for months now. And unfortunately, I've had to postpone it a few different times, so I'm really thankful that he was willing to accommodate that on his end. But yes, guys, I'm looking forward to our guest. He's a brother in the faith. He has quite an interesting story, and this is actually a rather unorthodox live stream for me because typically I like to talk about things pretty much wholesale faith, things to do with scripture, things to do with theology. And we will actually potentially touch on some of this stuff tonight. But this brother has had a fascinating life. He's a fellow Canadian, and he's part of a documentary that recently just got released. And so I would love for you guys to check it out. It's called The People versus David and Colette Stephan, and it will blow your mind. I'm not just using hyperbole here. Like it'll when I watched it, a lot of different emotions came over me. Let's just say that. And so if you guys are interested in checking out this documentary, it's about an hour and a half long. Go to the link in the description at the very top of the description box of this video. Click on the link and help support the production that went into this, and give it a watch, guys. I know probably the vast majority of my viewers are likely into things that go against the mainstream view on stuff. You know, if you follow my channel for a while and you're subscribed here, you go against the grain of orthodoxy as it pertains to Christianity. And so you likely are tracking in other ways as well when it comes to different things regarding worldviews and the corruption and the lies that we find ourselves wading through in these interesting days that we're living in. And so please do click on the link if you feel led to watch this documentary. It's like I said, it's very eye-opening, very relevant for us in our lives and where the trajectory of, I guess, North America is going. Not only North America, but it seems like the entire world. And so when people have the courage and the means and the skills to make such forms through media like this documentary is, we need to support them, guys. We need to get behind them and help get the word out, because there is a very important word that needs to get out that is portrayed in this documentary. Before I play the teaser for the documentary, I just want to say hello to some of my amazing future immortal viewers who are in the chat. Let me start from the top here. We got Carmela Lazarus. She's excited. She's saying woohoo. Shalom, sister. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Tyler Porter, sorry. What up, future immortals? Yes. Shalom, brother. Thanks for joining us. We got Sister Lou Rubink. Shalom from the cool downstate of Northern California. Only 91 today. What is that? 91? That's what? 28-ish? I don't know. I'm talking in Canadian here now, so I got to do the math in my head. Aaron Boer. Shalom, friends. Shalom, brother. Thank you for joining us. We got GR Cleve in the house saying shalom to y'all. Shalom, guys. Thanks for joining. Oh, we got a new one, I think. I'm not sure if I've seen Static Kingdom. Shalom, everyone. Can't stay for the whole thing, but this should be a good one. Yes, it should. Yes, it should. I recommend, if you can't stay for the whole thing, check it out afterwards. Brother David, his name is David. David Stephan. He is an awesome guy. He's an awesome guy, and so you're gonna definitely want to hear what he has to say tonight. We got Country Dad in the house saying, "Hey everyone, shalom, shalom, brother." Matt, appreciate you for joining us. Thank you again for the mods who faithfully show up. I appreciate you guys. I know you don't really have to do much work because I don't tend to bring on controversial guests and go through debates and attract plethoras of different audiences over to the chat who could potentially be not so kind spirited. So I know you don't have to work too hard, but I do appreciate you here nonetheless, just in case. So much love to you guys. Tracy Jones is here saying, blessings to you all brave believers. Shalom, sister. Say hello to a couple more people, and then we'll just get going. We have Shamgar. We have Nick. Shalom, everyone. How's it going, brother? Thanks for coming. I know the timing is a little weird for a lot of you guys. It's unfortunate. I say this often here in Canada, which is where my brother David Stephan is from as well. He's actually 3 hours behind me. So if he ever decides to live stream and have a YouTube channel, all that stuff, he would actually have the perfect timing for you guys. So I'm hoping he's not going to usurp my my audience over to his if he ever potentially does do that, which I want to recommend that he does, because he's an awesome brother and he probably has a lot of cool things to say. But that said, I know that the time zones can be a little inconvenient from time to time. We got brother Sean Griffin, same shalom. Shalom, Sean. Appreciate you here. We got blank and blank servant saying shalom. Shalom. Welcome. Miss Helen Jeter. I was on Lighthouse and then I was bumped off. Has this happened to anyone else? I'm not sure what you mean by that, to be honest. I'm sorry, Helen. I'm not live streaming there, so I'm not 100% sure what you're referring to there, but I apologize on behalf of Lighthouse, I guess. Rakia Sky saying shalom, family. Okay, couple more. It's just nice to see everybody here. I don't want to skip everyone, but I don't want to keep our guests waiting too long here. Suzanne Jean Wilkins is in the house. I'm driving, but listening. Shalom, family. Drive safe, sister. If you're going to be listening, drive very safe. Sean Brugeling. Shalom, everyone. Excited to hear more of Stephen's story. His name's David, but his last name's Stephan. But yes, we want to hear his story. Tatash Shady, are you Christian Zionists? No, I can't say I am. Sorry. But thanks for joining us here. Last one here. Country Pumpkin. She's saying hi, or he. Hello, thanks for joining us. All right, guys, so I am going to share my screen here. And we're going to play the teaser.
In 2016, I found myself pacing back and forth in this small little jail cell in solitary confinement, wondering, how the heck did I get here? When you start putting all the pieces of the puzzle together, you see a real interesting story that emerges, an unbelievable story, really.
911 emergency, require police fire ambulance.
Hi, yes, my son's not breathing.
The RN nurse saw the child a day before 911 is called. She saw no reason to say, take the child to a doctor or go to emergency or anything like this.
She did mention the word meningitis.
He ends up rapidly declining.
They live in a rural place. So they say, well, heck, we'll just drive to the hospital.
Not far into the ride, he stopped breathing again.
We're driving down the highway really fast, and we meet up with an ambulance, and we hand Ezekiel over.
They are charged with failing to provide the necessities of life. You didn't see a lot of those prosecutions. Now you do, and Alberta is the worst. Children's Hospital in Calgary.
I get a phone call from the medical examiner's office saying that the autopsy's been performed and the report is complete, and that Ezekiel's death was vaccine preventable.
They treated him with home remedies, including mixtures of maple syrup and horseradish, instead of going to a doctor.
I mean, it was such a high-profile case. I don't even want to talk to people about it because the press has convinced them this child died of bacterial meningitis, and these parents were just so outrageous, you know, trying to treat bacterial meningitis with maple syrup. Like, that wasn't the evidence.
I was going to commit suicide because I felt I was a horrible person from reading what the media had said about me.
The pathologist that did the autopsy, he had received a letter from the Department of Justice, basically suggested Ezekiel died of bacterial meningitis. Now, that's highly inappropriate. And why would you do that?
They were trying to create case law that would allow them to criminalize people who didn't give their children vaccines.
An expert's supposed to be impartial. He was there to have them convicted, and I had that feeling about a lot of the doctors. This is tied for the dirtiest trial I've ever had to experience in my life.
The doctor wrote at the bottom in big bold letters, "I am not involved, underline, underline." Not involved in what?
Yeah. That's so hopefully that that gives you a quick little synopsis as to what we're dealing with here in this documentary. And again, I just want to remind you that it can be viewed in the description box below. You click the link and just go from there. So all that said, I'm gonna bring on the man of the hour here, David Stephan.
Hey, brother, how you doing?
Good man. How are you doing?
I am well, thank you.
Good. Brother, as I was saying before we hit the live stream button, this has been a few months in the making for me. I've been really eager to meet you, kind of, I guess, officially through this medium. And you're a brother who caught my eye a couple years ago, actually. It was during the height of the scamdemic. I was social media-ing, probably doom scrolling. And I came across something in my newsfeed on Facebook. One of our mutual friends had commented on a live video that you did on Facebook, and it caught my eye. I'm like, the little video had a picture of you kind of walking in it looked like, the Albertan wilderness, and you got this awesome hair, you got the beard. I'm like, he's got this like Christ-like countenance to him, he's got the nice appearance and all that stuff. I'm like, let's hear what this guy has to say, because my friend commented on the video and she was like, David, you're awesome, or keep going at it, or something like that. I'm like, well, going at what? Why are you so awesome? So I click on the video, and yes, you were awesome. You were talking about how we need to prepare for things to come, and the powers that be are moving heavily, and just stuff like that, right? And so it was right up my alley. I was like, okay, this guy's awesome, and he's in Canada. Awesome, because it doesn't seem like there's many people who are awake. At least it hasn't been my experience within my vicinity or the province in which I reside. And so it was just great and refreshing to hear you say that. You were very articulate in what you were saying. You had fervor and courage in what you were saying. And so it was just, it was a breath of fresh air. And so I was intrigued with who you are. So once I saw that video, I kind of scrolled down your Facebook page, and I was like, oh, okay, yes, this guy is legit. He's cool. He's awesome. He's a believer. You're talking about Sabbath, a couple posts down, and I was like, okay, so he keeps the Sabbath. All right, this guy's awesome. He's legit. And so that was my introduction to who you were, brother.
I'm going to presume that was probably November 2021. The video I did, I think I entitled it "Being Led Like Lambs to the Slaughter," and it was in relation to what was going on in the freedom movement at the time. And I had been invited to quite a few rallies to go and speak, and I took the opportunity three times, because And so anyways, but generally I just didn't go. The message I was conveying was significantly different, and people weren't getting it. And that's okay. Some people got it, I guess, but if I didn't feel impressed to go, I didn't go. But I decided, or I felt impressed to go at one point in time, just to go to a rally that I hadn't even been invited to. And it was more local, but I felt driven to go there. and it was the first time I was going to go to a rally where I hadn't been invited to speak. I'm busy. There's really important stuff to take care of, but I felt driven to go, and so I went. And there was some of the big the freedom leaders there, and I just observed. I observed the audience. I observed the messages. I observed how the audience was lapping it up, and I just really had this epiphany, this understanding come over me as to how dangerous this was.
Yeah.
And it was at that same time that I was really being, there was a turning taking place in me where I began to realize that the only way out of this was not mass non-compliance. And that was a big message at the time, but that it was actually mass repentance, that all of this was coming upon us and being allowed to come upon us based on the debauchery that we have allowed to creep into society and all this. So now the message that at that point in time was even getting heavier, where I realized, oh boy, like this is cliche, like start crying repentance to people. Oh my God. Anyway, so I did that first video after having that understanding, and I didn't go deep into it. I didn't go hard on it, but I basically threw it back onto the individual, saying we have our own individual responsibility and we got to, get things in order here. Rather than pointing the finger and saying these guys are evil, well, yeah, but what about the evil in us? If we don't root that out, we can point fingers all day, but the fact of the matter is that the consequences of evil will come upon us. So, so I'd put that out there, and I was expecting a lot of lashback, similar to when I first called COVID a hoax, right? In March of 2020, which was a little bit ahead of the time. And a lot of my freedom-loving friends turned against me at that time. They didn't see it for what it was. And so I expected the same thing. I expected a lot of lashback, but instead that video got like 2,000 shares or something crazy. And I'm like, what? This is telling people that they need to change, not demand change, right? But they need to change. They need to repent. Anyway, so I presume it was that video, because that was the biggest video that I had at that point, and it ended up bringing a lot more people onto my social media.
I assume it probably was that one. It's crazy what the algorithms will do, but it was a refreshing message. Because there was a mixture, a blending of, like you said, like spiritual elements to the natural elements, and it was a refreshing message. I just remember it wasn't just somebody being like, this whole thing's a scam and don't get jabbed and don't do this and that. You incorporated, you did incorporate some spiritual relevance into it, and so that's what really caught my eye with that. But man, those were interesting times, man, because I considered myself to be somewhat courageous throughout my life. There was moments, intermittent moments of courage displayed on my end, but when this whole thing happened, I think it really revealed, how do I say this? I experienced a lot of what you did. A lot of friends, disown me. I mean, I've lost a lot of friends throughout the years, not even just because of my views on what took place the last few years, but with my faith, right? Looking into the Bible, into the scriptures, seeing that they teach something that wasn't what I was brought up being told they taught. So I lost quite a bit through that, and I attributed some courage through that loss to that, but this was a different level. This was like a level where it's like, now it's affecting my mobility rights. It's affecting my employment status. It's affecting, you know what I mean? Like, it was really touching home. And so, you definitely continued to stoke the fire with that video, because I remember having some hard times, even just in my marriage through that period of time, and videos like that were really inspiring to me to continue going the path that I was going, because it felt right. It felt like this was the way you're supposed to handle things. And ultimately, when you understand the scriptures, you can kind of weave your way through the deceptions. You can see that there's something behind the curtain there that most people don't really see. And so it's almost like the skeleton key for life, the scriptures, in my opinion.
Yep.
But yeah, brother, that's someone saying here, wasn't he on what was it? Isn't this Yeah, isn't the guest friends with outside the camp? Yes. Yes. A Thanatos. You were correct in saying that. Brother David has been on Andrew Leclerc's Outside the Camp YouTube channel a couple times now, I think, right?
Yeah, 2 or 3. Yeah, at least 2 times. Yep.
Yeah. And actually, I had seen you there too. So this is, I guess, this segues into why I was intrigued with having you on for this particular conversation today. Is when you were on Outside the Camp, you had the beginning of the live stream with Andrew talked about this documentary that you were releasing and this tour that you were going to be going on. And so he played the same, I believe it was the same teaser that I played. And my jaw was dropped. I was like, are you kidding me? Okay. Because this is the same guy that I watched the video a couple years earlier. And I'm like, this guy's like full of courage and he's cool. He's inspiring. But I didn't reach out to you. I don't think I really interacted with you much. I'm like, okay, he's gonna, like you said, the algorithms took that video and just, and so I'm like, he's probably getting inundated with people's comments and messages. I'm like, I'm not gonna bother the guy, right? But when I saw you on Outside the Camp, I was like, oh, okay. He's closer to the home, so to speak, in our little community of believers. He keeps Sabbath. He understands the need for doing the instructions of Yahweh in our lives. He's getting that. And so I'm like, okay, so this is like more niche now. It's all of a sudden gone from the macro of being a freedom lover to now you've microed it to keeping commandments and you know what I mean? So I'm like, I think I can reach out to him this way. And so yeah.
To digress just for a brief moment, those 2 things are inseparable, by the way. Freedom and being observant to the commandments of the Most High, which is interesting. I mean, it's an interesting, we could spend the whole podcast here talking about that. But the founding fathers, one of my videos that I did years ago was specifically on the founding fathers. 3 of them in particular: Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and I think George Washington. The 3 of them all well articulated how freedom or liberty could not exist amongst a people that were not virtuous, but that virtue, and we know where virtue comes from, right? I mean, when you boil it right down, it's keeping the instructions of the Most High. But that virtue, or without virtue, liberty could not exist, and they had recognized that and articulated that well. And when we take a look at history, whether we're looking at the Bible or whether we're looking at other written history, we see that those 2 things cannot be separated: freedom and keeping his commandments. And so it's interesting. Anybody preaching freedom and trying to teach us how to obtain freedom and having it separated from the principles of virtue, it's just lip service.
Yeah, no, I agree. Amen. And before we we fully peel back the layers of who you are, brother, did you go to the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa? Did you make it there? No,
I didn't. I did not feel driven to do so.
Okay. Yeah, I took the commute out. It took me some time, but it was one of the most interesting things I'd ever experienced in my life, I think. Just the amount of hugging and high-fiving random complete strangers during a time where you feel like you're potentially going to be stripped of all your rights in the country. It just like it was interesting. It really was. But yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, I've heard from a lot of people who went out there that it was just a beautiful experience, and that was one of the things that that I observed even just in the freedom rallies on a much more micro scale. In observing them, like I think the one time I spoke, there was a half decent turnout at that point in time. I think we were looking at about a couple thousand, anyways. I know the one guy was saying about 5,000. I don't think it was quite that much, but maybe it was. But big crowd, and though I disagreed largely with the messaging, that it was a little bit misguided, right? That it wasn't going to obtain or achieve what we were looking to achieve. What was beautiful about all of that is the sense of community, even. And just being able to fellowship with people and whatnot. And so I got to meet, even though I didn't go to that many, I got to meet some great people through the whole process. And so there was a minimum that, and I heard that was basically what was going on out at the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, but to a much greater level.
Yeah.
Where there was just a lot of a lot of unity, a lot of love, a lot of community, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it was it was incredible, man. It was, I mean, as you have experienced, the media definitely vilified and completely distorted, what actually took place down there. I was there. I saw the bouncy castles. I saw the kids running around having fun, the hot tubs, the cookouts, you know what I mean? It was just it was just so funny to see the CBC and other news outlets completely slandering and trying to put a different spin on what was going on there. But you are well aware of how they do that, and we're going to get to some of that stuff. But so, brother, before I get ahead of myself, I want to know, and I want my audience to know who you are, where you're from, what you do. That's starting to sound like a Backstreet Boy song, isn't it? all that stuff, right? As long as you love Yeshua. Yeah, so just let us know who you are, man. Who you are, where you're from,
All right.
the rest of it, your faith, what your upbringing was, all that stuff before we get into the nitty-gritties of the documentary.
All right, I'm going to put this into a can real tight. So 41 years old, born in Fort McMurray, Alberta, oil country. My dad ran a very successful large property management business where he had a lot of the government contracts. At the age of 10, we moved down south to southern Alberta, right into like the northwest, or sorry, southwest corner of Alberta, where you're getting close to the mountains. It's a beautiful part of Alberta. And that's what you're going to see, or you did see in that preview. You get to see basically the view that I have every day from my house of the mountain landscape and all that. Unfortunately, the windmills are mainly behind us, not between us and the mountain, so we don't have to stare at the windmills. But moved to southern Alberta because that's where my mother was from, and which is Mormon country. And so I actually grew up Mormon and was Mormon until 33 years old. I was a faithful Mormon, and when I say that, I don't say it lightly. I was one that dug into the scriptures, and obviously at that time the array of scriptures that I was referring to as scripture was much bigger than it is today, to a degree, I guess, because we had the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants, all this stuff, right? And that's right. But then also around that same time, before I was 33, I started to dig into more stuff. I think the first one I dug into was the Book of Jasher, and then started going into the Book of Enoch, and just got really hungry for all this information and understanding more, and ended up with this massive book like this that was compiled by Joseph Lumpkin.
Pete Lumpkin, yeah, I've got that one too.
Yeah, I did a fantastic job. So, I got that, and then I started I never stopped digging, right? And just love it. And it became such a challenge to my theology that I was holding on to. And you're taught in Mormonism. I mean, this is the one true church. And it's just a shame that not everybody else is adhering to it because they won't be saved, right? That's what you're being taught. And, when you grow up in it and you're faithful and you dig in deep and you really, my theology was solidified, and I would have argued it vehemently, and I did many times with other people. And when I reflect back, I just look and say, what a fool I was. What a fool that I would have been willing to be so arrogant to argue these things that couldn't be reconciled with scripture, right? With the Bible, right. Or others. Like, it's shocking. Or even, and I'll say this is an interesting statement, but couldn't even be reconciled with the Book of Mormon. That's how weird it gets, right? Like,
really, yeah.
You're defending the Mormon church, but it's contrary to stuff that they're using. And I'm not here to try to posture up the Book of Mormon. In fact, most people don't actually understand the contradictions that it has to the Bible. And they're grasping at straws. But when you leave the camp of the antinomians and you read the Book of Mormon, and then you read the Bible, and you see the Bible for what it is, and that it's not antinomian, and then you read the Book of Mormon, you see, oh, that's where the contradictions lie, that it's antinomian. And that
all of a sudden Deuteronomy 13 and 18 make a little more sense, eh?
It's just interesting how so so then all that gets parked. But so I grew up Mormon, and it was a slow transition out. I'm not one to move quickly. I'm not one to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so it was a very slow transition for years where I was not being driven by emotion, saying, wait a minute, I've been lied to, everything's gone, because I've watched so many people come out of Mormonism, they actually go atheistic, right? And so that's just not where I am. And so it was a slow journey with the Most High, just seeking his will and wanting to know what the truth was. And it just slowly came into my life, piece by piece. It was a very slow process. I mean, when you're talking, an arrogant fool like myself, it takes time to penetrate those barriers that I've put up, right? To break down the paradigms that I've solidified in my mind. And so it was a slow journey. But it was a steady journey. I wasn't, you kind of always knew what you're going to get. I'm not to the left or to the right one day and you just don't know what you're going to get. It was just a very slow, methodical journey and just being led. And what was interesting about this is that it was late 2014, early 2015 that we actually finally moved over to keeping the Sabbath. And now I'm still going to the Mormon church at this time. So I'm keeping the Sabbath on, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. And then I'm going to church on Sunday and I'm teaching at the church, right? I've got a calling there and I'm teaching. And
you were a teacher too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I was, yeah. So it's not like I was just, a pew warmer or whatever, right? Like it's, so I've got this conflict going on, but it's not so incredibly apparent yet, but it's like, okay, well, they're not quite there yet or whatever. Like there's some stuff there, and eventually it would just kind of, my eyes would be open and I'd realize, wait a minute, there's some, there's a lot of great stuff there. There's a lot of truth. That's how they get you, right? That's how it's packaged. And that goes for all of Christianity. I mean, Christians will look at the Mormons and condemn them, but hey, look at yourself first. Look at your own theology first as a whatever form of Christianity that you're involved in. Yeah. Take a look at yourself and see whether or not your theology actually reconciles with the Bible. But then you start to see some other stuff going on and how there's elements of masonry, right? Freemasonry that are incorporated into the Mormon church. And you're like, whoa, okay. So you got these, this truth that like feels so good. And then you got all this nefarious stuff. And it's like, oh, okay. Right. And you just, at some point in time, you just realize, got to put a stop to it. Like it's done. It's done. And so, it finally came to that point towards the end of 2016, 2017. And then eventually they would hunt me down. And I know we're kind of getting digressing here as to who I am or whatnot, but
no, man, let us know.
February, or it was last week of December of 2020. And at this point in time, I'd had a family move on to my property. And they were helping, with just around, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot going on the farm at that point in time, but we still had some greenhouse stuff to take care of, infrastructure and all that, and firewood to get and all that. And so they came and lived on the property and they're hanging out, and they themselves were Mormons, but they weren't going. But so anyways, it got out that they were on our property. And all of a sudden I'm being accused of running a religious cult. And so I get called in. And I hadn't gone to church for like over 4 years at this point in time. So I'm like, you got no authority over me. Like, I'm not part of you guys, but I'm interested. I'm interested in what this is all about. I'm going to entertain this. This will be interesting. So, typically when you get called in by the authorities, in the Mormon church, you dress up in your tie and your white shirt and all that. And so anyways, I showed up in my work hoodie and my rugged pants and sat down and said, "What's up, guys?" Right?
Just a rebel.
just showing, hey, like, I don't have respect for this process. Don't know what you're up to, but I'm here. I'm going to entertain this. Let's hear what you have to say. And so anyways, these accusations start coming out. I said, oh, interesting. And so they're like, yeah, you're running a religious compound. Are you praying with that family? I said, yes. And you see their eyes light up like, yes, there's one. Are you like, do you praise with them? Do you sing hymns with them? I'm like, yeah. And now they're like, okay, we got the evidence. He's running a religious compound. And I just said, don't you encourage all of your congregation to do those things? And it's just like wind out of the sails. So then they went into what they called the Temple Recommend interview. And the first question that came up was, do you honor and sustain President Russell M. Nelson as prophet, seer, and revelator of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? And I said, no, to be honest with you, I don't at all. And so now they got me. right? They didn't get me on the accusations that they were trying to get me on initially, but now they got me, right? Because I don't honor and sustain him. I said, no, actually, now by the point that this came in that we got to this point, it was early February. So it had started, the process had started initially in the last week of December, and there was and then anyways there's delays, but so by the time, actually I think we're at end of January at this point in time, what had happened is the COVID shot had just come out, you know, a month and a half previous, but Russell M. Nelson, the prophet of the Mormon Church, had just received his COVID shot, and he had a picture taken of him getting it with his mask on, and you can tell he's just like happy as a pig in mud, and he's getting it. And he, on his tweet, he says, you know, that him and his wife Wendy had been praying for this literal godsend. I'm like, whoa, there we go. There's blasphemy. One, you're clearly deceived, or you're not deceived and you're just a deceiver, right? Which, either way, you know, you got 15 million Mormons looking at you attentively to see what your stance is on all of this, waiting, you know, because there's a lot of hesitancy, but hey, they're going to follow your lead. And a lot of them did, even though that they felt inclined, like they were adamantly opposed to this jab. They didn't feel right, but when he went and did that, okay, now it's a matter of faith. We're being faithful to the prophet. That's going to give us brownie points in heaven, whatever, right? So he's getting the jab, and he calls it literal godsend. I'm like, there's blasphemy right there. So he's a deceiver, or he's a deceived deceiver, and he's committing blasphemy. And so I said straight up, no, I don't agree with what he just did there. He committed blasphemy. And I also disagree with what he's doing in relation to working with the Catholic Church to help establish a one world religion. And they're actually referring to him, the Mormon Church leadership is referring to the Pope as His Holiness. I'm like, whoa,
really?
Hold on a minute here. What? So it's really, really strange, because, you know, when we're growing up and we're being taught, even from stuff from the Book of Mormon, you're learning that the Catholic Church is the great whore, right? Like the whore of Babylon is what we're being taught. And yet
forget all that. Forget all that.
Right? They're now tying that in, like, and calling him, referring to him as His Holiness, and working in lockstep with him. It's so, anyways, what happened is they excommunicated me for apostasy, and I just said, wow. Well, I don't know if this works on the same principle that an enemy to my enemy is my friend, but an apostate, if I'm apostate to an organization that's apostate to my God, my creator, you know, the Most High, what does that make, right? So I'm glad to be deemed apostate to an apostate organization, but I'm not sure that that necessarily establishes my my standing before the Most High. But so that's kind of, you know, so in a nutshell, that's kind of who I am, or theologically, that's where I come from. I'm very natural minded. As you see products here, I head up the retail division for the company, Truehope, for Canada. So I oversee all of the operations there. And it's generally, we're focusing in on mental health, neurotransmitter production, hormone production. So, you know, which oftentimes is synonymous with mental health or lack thereof. And so we're a natural health company that has been helping people now since 1996, starting actually with my family, come off psychiatric medications, get well, and feel great without the side effects of these psychiatric medications, and with a much greater impact on people's lives than what the psychiatric medications could ever deliver. So that's what I've been doing since, even though I grew up with it. I started officially working with my dad when I was 20 years old. And so that was back in 2002-ish, 2003-ish that I started working with him. 2003. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Spring of 2003.
And you're VP of Truehope right now?
I'm VP of this division. So I oversee all the Canadian stuff. There's a whole other leg to the company that is international. And so I oversee this division, and they're both equal in size and standing at this point in time. But so I basically oversee the operations of half the company.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you for that snapshot, brother. There's so much there. Gosh, it was really interesting during the pandemic how many different religious characters kind of stepped forward and said, "Your duty as a believer, as a Christian, is to roll up your sleeve, you know, for grandma and for the fellow man. This is loving your neighbor, and you know, the things where it would be like Jesus would have done it. He would have got the vaccine, and he would wear mask. You know, just I literally saw that kind of, I would say, propaganda in churches, man. Like my wife and I, without slandering the church or naming it or anything like that, we went to a church, and we just wanted to. We were craving community so bad. We didn't have anyone that we felt was like-minded with our beliefs, and so we decided, well, let's try the church thing again. Let's go back and see if we can establish some friendships and some community. At least they believe in God, you know, and Jesus, and like. So we volunteered this one Saturday to help clean up around the church, and I was in the basement getting some supplies or something like that, and I saw these like little posters they had in the basement saying like Jesus would be wearing a mask, wear a mask, like just stuff like that. And I was like, Jess, that's the name of my wife. I'm like, Jess, I can't do this. Like, this is like, this is antithetical to like the core of who I am right now. And so, yeah, it was wild, man. Just seeing, like you said, there seems like there's this ecumenical, you know, movement of establishing a one world. Let's just knock down all barriers and borders. And it sounds amazing, you know, if you don't really know what the outcome or what, you know, the implications of that really is. And so, yeah, I agree with you for sure. That's actually eye-opening that you would say that just about the whole Mormon leadership and kind of where they went with that. But one of the things you also said was that you were struggling with tearing down the paradigms in your mind. You said you were involved in doing that, and that really resonated with me because I was doing that as well, you know. When I came into the faith that I currently have, you know, I also, like yourself, grew up in a religious environment. You know, I went to church all my life and this and that, rebelled as a teenager, you know, then eventually got back into wanting to go back to church and being around good people. But that still left kind of like a hole in my heart. There's something missing. Like there's got to be more to who this God of the universe is than what I'm told he is. It seems like it's just a cheap narrative, what I currently believe, right? And so I had to do some digging myself. And it's crazy. Like you said, you tear down the paradigms in your mind and you start, you know, you remove the lenses that you formerly had over your eyes, and you have a completely fresh view of how to look at things. And it's like, it's wild what's really there, what's really revealed in Yahweh's word. It's wild. And it informs your worldview outside of the scriptures, right? So then, like you were saying, like so many people got on board with the jabby jab, so many good-hearted Christian believers who just aren't studied enough in the word, or were, you know, indoctrinated into the different denominations that they're in, and they believed the lies of, you know, go and get this thing done, and lots of them are suffering because of it. You know what I mean? And it's just like, when you have a true understanding of what God's word says, you challenge the upbringing that you had with the lenses that you had over your eyes all those years, and you start looking at the word in a different way. All of a sudden, everything around you changes. Your worldview does change out of necessity, and it just automatically, in my opinion, that's a transitionary period that takes place once you press into the word of God. You understand eschatology, you understand God's plan, you know, the coming kingdom, you understand who these rulers are. Like, all this stuff plays in a role, and it just informs you as to what's going on in the world. And if you don't have all that information, if you're just going to warm the pew on a Sunday and then going out for lunch with your friends afterward, and that's all you get, of course you're going to buy into the lies, the things that the plans that Satan clearly has for us in these last days. And so, yeah, it's wild, man. It totally is. And so I'm just, like I said, I'm glad to hear your end of things. And yeah, just a breath of fresh air, brother. The elephant in the room for me is you and I both have these Gleason maps, but then just south of your Gleason map, You've got a globe. So are you
I mean,
currently tussling? Are you at war with the biblical
no,
cosmological view,
no.
or
There's a
what's
reason the globe stands under. There's a reason
it's
why the globe
subservient?
is.
Okay.
That's yeah, no. So the globe was purchased before 2016, which is when I was introduced to the whole flat Earth thing, which I just said that what a crock. And as soon as the one guy bringing it forward to me, it was I hadn't heard anything. I live kind of in a bubble, right? I don't watch a whole lot of videos online. I don't take the time to do that. So the theology that I have isn't even really influenced that much by outsiders, more so than just studying the scripture and slowly having this leading. So I was actually shocked when all of a sudden I started gaining Facebook friends that had similar beliefs. I'm like, there's more out here that what is this, right? Like, and I live in a bubble here in Mormon country that nobody else is Torah observant and all this, and Sabbath observant. And so when it came to the flat Earth, it was the first time I'd heard about it. This guy introduces it, and he brings up something mathematical in relation to the curvature. I'm like, oh boy, okay, this will be easy, right? Like math was my thing. I didn't do homework in school. I didn't care for school. In fact, I graduated early. I'm pretty sure I graduated. I never did check to just make sure because I was within a percentile or two on my English. But when it came to the sciences and math, I excelled and was on the honors. Like I even got a scholarship from how well I did in those topics. But I'm like, I'm not going to post-secondary education. Get me out of here. So I'm like, okay, math, I can figure that out. Let's go take a look at this. So I went to dig into the curvature aspect of it. And as soon as I realized, wait a minute.
Yeah, the curve math, 6 inches per mile squared, right?
Yeah. 8 inches per mile squared. And so I started employing that that quite often. And there are some areas here, even though I'm not near large bodies of water, but they're flat enough. The prairies.
Oh yeah, Alberta.
That there's things that I see that I ought not to see. When I can see a couple thousand feet of a particular mountain that comes right out of the prairies, not part of the Rocky Mountains. It's actually it's to the southeast of me. But when I'm traveling near my head office and I can see that, and I run the mathematical equation, and it shows it's supposed to be 200 feet over the horizon, and yet I'm seeing thousands of feet above the horizon of this particular mountain. I have to ask the question as to where's the curvature there, right? Like, how am I possibly seeing a significant portion of that? So there's those types of things. So I started going and digging into it. And as soon as I realized that I couldn't disprove the flat Earth concept using the curvature equation, now I had more questions. And I said, well, yeah, but what about this? What about this? What about? And then my question would eventually get answered. I'd be like, well, what about this? So I was not giving myself over. I was not relinquishing the whole globe concept.
That's a big one, man.
And so actually it's interesting because the globe here actually helped me to solidify some of that, because I went and I mapped it out, strung out, I know the globe isn't quite perfect to scale, but it's close enough that it's going to highlight some significant stuff, because they'll claim, it's not quite there. But, I wrap my little cord around and I mark off, every 1,000 miles. And I started pre-booking all sorts of flights in the Southern Hemisphere. And it was interesting when I took my string
light pattern,
and I took it over the globe, and I took it over the flat Earth map there. And oh boy, all of my layovers and everything in my pre-booking of flights from Sydney to Johannesburg to Santiago, Chile, and all that, they all made sense there. They made no sense there, not at all. So I keep that as a reference point, but no, I'm not struggling or fighting, but there's a reason why the globe is underneath of that one, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's funny, and that could be a whole other discussion, man. I'd love to have you on again. We got a lot to talk about. We have a lot of similar beliefs, which is awesome. But what we're really here for is, in the midst of all this testing and all this chaos that's going on in your life, of challenging your faith and re-examining, the faith that you were brought up with, and all this other stuff. There's another backdrop to your life that's going on right now, right? Mm-hmm. And so can we touch on that a little bit, and just in terms of relating to the documentary? What is this documentary? People didn't see it, or just coming in didn't see the 2.5-minute teaser here. I know this is, you can't really nutshell this, but if you could kind of provide us with the last, was it about 15 years of your life, where all of this has taken place? 12 years?
12 years. Yeah. So if I was to,
you know,
so yeah, so 12 years ago, so 2012, my second son, 18 months old, he passes away. We didn't know what he passed away from. There was speculation that bacterial meningitis had been seen in the local clinic about 2 weeks previous to it taking place. But he was just kind of up and down, like he'd been sick for a week, and he overcame the croup and all that. But then he just kind of waxed and waned, and just lower energy, but he was doing fine. Like there was no reason for concern. And so anyways, what happens though is one night he all of a sudden goes into crisis. And this is, as you can see from the teaser, this is one day after my wife had this nurse over who's also a midwife. And my wife at the time is 4.5 months pregnant. And so the midwife is coming over to check, but she checks on Ezekiel, my second son, and, listens to his breathing, listens to, gets his pulse, all that, heartbeat, everything, just goes over all his vitals, and it all comes back normal. There's nothing of concern. And there's no evidence of an infection either. There's no mucus in the eyes, there's no runny nose, there's nothing. And so the next day he's improving, but then towards the evening, he wakes up from a nap and he goes into crisis very, very quickly. Right. And he had this breathing pattern. I didn't recognize what it was, but I'm like, this is nothing. Like he's cognizant. He seems fine. He seems tired, but he's cognizant. Like he's, I put him back down for his nap after he woke up. I gave him some fluids. But it would be a couple years later, actually be 4 years later, that we'd find ourselves in court after he'd passed away. He ended up in a hospital, and it just became a big rigmarole, which I'll kind of circle back to. But we're in the courts. We've been charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life. And they were trying to make a vaccine trial out of it, where they were going to hold parents in Canada criminally liable if they didn't vaccinate their children. And so they actually falsified my son's autopsy report to make it look like he had bacterial meningitis, and that particular bacterial meningitis would have been prevented by the Haemophilus influenza B vaccine. And so I'm listening to a medical examiner talk about different breathing patterns and whatnot, and she starts to explain Cheyne-Stokes breathing. Yeah. And that's when finally it clicks. That's what he had. He was starting to shut down. His body was shutting down. And so they were saying that it was Cheyne-Stokes breathing because of the intracranial pressure from bacterial meningitis, that it was so bad that it began to compress his brainstem and shut down his, all of his functions, right? All of his vitals. Which is interesting, because anybody that has like kind of intracranial pressure, that would be the biggest headache
they'll make it known. Yeah, they'll make it known.
They'll make it known. Yeah. Our son was fine. He in fact, 3-4 hours before that, he had no symptoms at all. Woke me up from a nap, playing with my lip, doing a little flip, blah, 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 that type of thing. And so, before he goes down for his nap, he takes his cup of electrolytes and drinks it, and it's fine, right? On his own. So not what you'd anticipate from somebody that's about to die from bacterial meningitis, 3 hours later. There's no observance of pain, nothing like that. And there's no fever. There's none of that. There's none of the telltale signs of bacterial meningitis, but they falsified the autopsy report to do this. So what ends up happening, though, is that when he first went into crisis, we ended up driving him to the hospital. And a mile into the drive, he had stopped breathing for the second time. He had started breathing again and seemed fine. And it took us over 20 minutes to get our other son out of bed and go get everything ready in the vehicle and everything. And it didn't seem like let's take him to the hospital and find out why he stopped breathing in the first place, because he started breathing again. But then a mile into the drive, he stops again. So we rendezvous with an ambulance, and that's when it became really interesting. Yeah. And we'd find all this stuff out later, and there's still stuff that we don't know, but because they've actually maybe not burned, but they purged the evidence. Like, it's gone, it's done. And so he gets into his ambulance, and Alberta Health Services had taken over all of the ambulance services a year previous. And
AHS, man.
Yeah, the most corrupt medical system, and the most largest medical system, at least in North America. So they take it over, and something goes awry in the South Zone, where whoever's in charge of stocking the ambulances in that particular area, or making sure all the inventory is up, they actually go into the ambulances and they start removing intubation equipment for young children and toddlers.
Okay.
And the paramedics, and we got the testimony in multiple trials, right? The paramedics said, we need that equipment back. And the request was never honored until 1 week after my son had passed away. All of a sudden, and they'd been requesting it for a full year. So these ambulances have been going without this equipment for a full year. My son ends up in a crisis, needs that equipment. They don't have it. They can't intubate him. He goes over 8.5 minutes without oxygen. And all of a sudden, Alberta Health Services is responding to those requests to put that intubation equipment back in.
Yeah.
Well, he gets into the hospital. They end up needing to transport him to Alberta Children's Hospital, where he ends up on life support for 5 days. There's a lot of other dicey stuff that took place during the transport and all that. But, just for the sake of brevity, he passed away March 18th, 2012. Mm-hmm. And 7 months later, they'd come up with that falsified autopsy report, and we ordered it because we wanted closure. We want to know, what did he pass away from? Like, what happened here? Because we were still extremely confused, and we weren't getting any clear answers from the doctors. And so we ordered the autopsy report, and we finally get it towards the end of 2012. And I'm reading it, and I'm looking at it, I'm saying, oh boy, with the amount of pro-vaccine stuff in here, which the only relevancy I could ever, deduct that as to why it'd be there is they're planning on using that.
Yeah, they're formulating a case. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, so now I'm going paranoid. I'm thinking they're going to charge us. And then December rolls around and January rolls around. I'm like, okay, no, I was just paranoid, Then February rolls around and all of a sudden the RCMP are reaching out to us. And
another corrupt organization within our lovely country.
Well, we discovered just how corrupt they were. I mean, they did a lot of unlawful stuff during the investigation. They actually stacked the deck, even though the initial RCMP investigator who did the interviews, he came back with the recommendation that there was no criminality here, no charges necessary. So basically, it was parked until it ended up in a different detachment, in the not even in our jurisdiction, actually in the jurisdiction where my father's company Truehope is, where that same detachment at one point in time, years previous, came guns drawn to do a raid on us, backed by 9 Health Canada agents. So we have a history with them. And so it's interesting that it would end up in that jurisdiction and not in my local jurisdiction, because I live an hour away from there. And so they went and they did a lot of nasty stuff in the investigation to stack the deck, including selecting particular medical evidence that would establish one narrative while omitting all of the other. And RCMP aren't medical experts, so they were obviously colluding with.
They don't do that though. Come on now. Right? I mean, you know about Coots too, right? Yeah. What all happened down in Coots is
pretty close to us.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah, scary to think about.
Yeah, just filthy. So no, RCMP had their hands, their dirty hands in on this. There was some criminality there. Alberta Health Services, there was criminality there. It started off with criminality. It was criminal negligence resulting in death of my son, which is up to 25 years in jail. So they were the first ones right off the bat. And so now the RCMP is helping them cover and helping to try to establish this false narrative of bacterial meningitis. And then Alberta Solicitor General's office is also in on it. They were the ones that initially submitted an 18-page report before the autopsy even took place on my son. The medical examiner received an 18-page report from the Alberta Solicitor General's office saying that my son died from bacterial meningitis. Interesting, right? Yeah. How would they know that? How would a lawyer right? And why would that be taking place? Like, I believe it was on a Sunday night that email went out. Why? Whose work? Like, it's just really strange. All of the things that were stacked against us right off the bat. But there are so many organizations that have established or involved themselves in criminality, including CBC. Because then what happened is in 2016,
the propaganda arm of all this, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. Like, so I'm starting to do research when I start, putting all of the puzzle pieces together. The Crown has charged us. The RCMP is owned by the Crown. CBC is owned by the Crown. Mm-hmm. These are all Crown organizations working in collusion to establish this precedent in Canada, removing parental rights and medical choice here in Canada, that, hey, you don't vaccinate your children, you're going to go to jail if something bad happens. And we falsify an autopsy report to say, hey, your child would have been saved had he got this vaccine. And that's exactly what they did with us.
Yeah.
So 2016 rolls around. Yeah, CBC comes out, and like the media was actually favorable to us at first, but then CBC comes on the stage, and right off the bat, we start seeing stuff like this.
This is just so cringe, brother. Like just the mockery and sarcasm here. You know what I mean? Like, treated dying toddler with herbs and religious blessings. It's just this, when you posted it, like when I saw this in the documentary, I was like, "Are you?" This is just wild.
Yeah, and I know that reporter. I spent a lot of time with that reporter.
These people, man.
On another trial where she was claiming it was a starvation case, but yet, and the headline literally was starvation case. And so I went to report on this, knowing what the media was going to do to this couple, because it was very reminiscent. It was the second trial of its kind. We were the first of its kind in Canada. It was a precedent-setting trial. There was another trial following suit coming out of Alberta Children's Hospital as well. Very similar. I mean, these were Seventh-day Adventists that lived a very organic lifestyle, home birth, homeschool, all that.
I remember them. Yeah. Yep.
So I ended up reporting on them. I went to their 3-week trial. I went every day. Rented a place in Calgary because I knew how important it was. I felt, I was driven to do it. I really didn't want to do it, I'll be honest with you. But I was driven to do it. So I just, do it. Went and bought the live stream equipment, all that type of stuff, knowing that I was going to be doing this 3 weeks, day in, day out. And so she was also on that case day in, day out. And it's amazing when you see how these people are selling their souls to do a job like this, because she knew what the truth was. And this child was in the 98th percentile for his weight when he died. It wasn't a starvation case. He was out of 100 people, there would have only been his age and his height. There would have only been 2 that were heavier than him out of 100, and yet somehow it's a starvation case. Like, it was so far from the truth. Anyway,
that's wild, brother. It's, I mean, it's all about hit pieces, right? That's what they do, and it's and not to like, go somewhere different with this, but do you know who Jeremy McKenzie is?
No.
And so in your documentary, I think it was your attorney Sean who had mentioned, has the media like you guys were like the most vilified Canadians through the media that he's ever seen. And I'm like, yeah, 100%. But then Jeremy McKenzie is a veteran, and he's just did a cross country tour as well. He went to Vancouver all the way, and he lives out in Nova Scotia. And so, anyways, he's a veteran who has been pro freedom for years, and he has a really good podcast, and it sparks a lot of interest, and it's garnered a lot of interest from CBC and other media sources, and they're constantly defaming the guy. Like I haven't seen any other Canadian, besides when I saw your documentary and then watched, oh wow, you guys were completely slandered by the media. He's one of them too, man, where he's just completely calling out the corruption of the government, of this, that. Like, he has this meme country called Diagolon. I'm not sure if you've heard of it or not. You will hear of it. I know you said you live isolated in a little bubble and you don't watch stuff or hear things, but he's, in short, without derailing our conversation, he's one of the main reasons why Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act. Him and the Diagolon country, who are touted as far-right extremists, who anti this, anti that, you know what I mean, misogyn, all those little slurs they like to throw. Like, he's garnered quite an audience in Canada for people who are just fed up with the government and just the propaganda and the whole vaccine narratives, all that stuff. So I'm sure you'll hear about him eventually, but like yourself, he's been completely slandered in the media consistently, and it's just wild. Anyway, sorry, buddy, go ahead.
I'm surprised that they're actually giving him attention, because all of my stuff came to a close so now I've got a large following because I'm in the court still. The court debacle went on forever. So 2016, we're found, I'll go nutshell on this real quick, and then I'll jump into why I'm surprised they're giving him attention. So 2016, I'm wrongfully convicted, me and my wife. She's on house arrest. I'm in jail. solitary confinement because the inmates would have killed me because now the media makes me out to look like an unremorseful baby killer, and
Right.
those types of people get killed in jail. And so
How
now,
long were you in there for?
just 3
Solitary.
weeks until I got out on appeal. So now we're going before the Alberta Appeals Courts. They do a dirty on us in spring of 2017. Well, actually, the hearing happened in spring of 2017. Normally, you would have had the decision happen that day or within a month and a half of the actual hearing. That's protocol. 8 months rolls around, and November 15th, on the due date of my daughter. So my wife's pregnant, ready to pop anytime. We get this dirty decision back. We thought we had it in the bag because we had 2 of the judges on our side, and it only has to be a majority rule because the appeal court is a panel of 3 judges. And so anyways, now we see it's 2-1 against us. And so now I'm supposed to go back to jail. I'm supposed to drive myself back to jail that day. And I'm saying, I'm not going to jail today. It ain't going to happen. And so rather than going to jail, rather than driving myself in, I busied myself writing a post on Facebook articulating how convenient it was that they know when my wife is due because we have to go in and check in with a parole officer on a regular basis. And that on her due date, they would render this decision trying to separate us. It was psychological warfare. Like a lot of the times that they were scheduling court proceedings was on the death date anniversary of Ezekiel, birthdays. It was so convenient. It was just, and it happened way too many times.
Coincidence, right?
Right. Especially 2018, 2019, 2021. Not that much taken place during that time other than 2019, but interestingly that they would have specific court dates on my birthday every year. I'm like, I don't care. I don't really celebrate my birthday. Like, whatever, right? Like, but at least I can easily remember where I was at the time or what was taking place. So you're just helping me, memorize the history better. But anyway, so November 15th, they come out with this decision. I'm supposed to go to jail. So I write this post and it goes big. In fact, that same reporter that did that smear article there, she reported on it, but she actually linked directly to my Facebook page, which now took all these CBC viewers and put them right on my page where they could see the truth, the full article in its entirety. And that was the last time they made that mistake. But anyways, so
sloppy.
Now, you think that you'd be better as a reporter, that if you're trying to smear somebody, don't give them a platform to actually speak the truth in its entirety, right? You just don't do that but they did. So then 2018 rolls around. We're appealing to the Supreme Court. I never did have to go to jail again. So now we're waiting for the Supreme Court. So we're still on the bail conditions, having to jump through all these hoops on a regular basis. Parole officer checking in Calgary to drive up there once a month just to show them our license and drive back. And it's just this big thing where they're trying to wear you down. And so anyways, Supreme Court, 7 judges unanimously say this was wrong. Like, this was really wrong. So now it's done. But they can now that everything's wrong, that's been established as being wrong, they can reinitiate the charges again and start off from square one. And that's exactly what they did. So now 2019, we're in a trial again, 3-month trial. And here's the thing, like, I went and got multiple quotes for what it would cost for representation for the trial. And one was like 450,000. The other was $500,000. Like that was the ballpark number that we were looking at. And so I said,
"Oh, is this the one you represented yourself at?"
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, I remember this part in the documentary. Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I felt driven that I needed to be representing myself. I just didn't have the courage to actually pull that trigger because, as you can imagine, like, everybody around you is saying, "What are you doing, you idiot? Like, are you kidding me? You think you're going to represent yourself in a complex criminal trial? Like, really?" But I felt driven that I was supposed to, and push came to shove with our lawyers that we currently had for the Supreme Court hearing. They were just by default, they're going to keep on going with the trial, but they quoted us. They were the ones that actually quoted us $500,000. I'm like, I don't see that in the cards. Like, I make half decent money, but not that half decent of money. Like, that's a lot. And at that time we were already like in debt to him, I think $30,000, something like that. So I'm like, oh, junk. So it came to the point that we had an impasse where they just weren't willing to expose some of the corruption that my brother was discovering. My brother had started digging deep into the medical files, him and a team, and they found some really intriguing stuff that nobody was aware of. And we discovered what caused Ezekiel to go into crisis in the first place. That somehow his potassium ended up elevated, but that's easily correctable. All he would have to do is get him an airway in the ambulance, get him into the hospital, stabilize him, give him some calcium chloride, which is what they actually did do at one point in time during transport. And all of a sudden, he's going to start correcting. And so during transport, they actually discovered this, that he had elevated potassium, and they gave him the calcium chloride. And even though he'd already gone 8.5 minutes without oxygen, he all of a sudden started animating, and they were afraid he's going to pull out his intubation tube. And that's when they hit him with rocuronium bromide and put him into cardiac arrest. And
Yeah,
so
they gave him too much, right? They overdosed him on that.
it wasn't just that it was too much. It's that on the insert for rocuronium bromide, that paralytic medication, which you don't give dead patients. So that right there undid their theory, because they said by the time you gave him to us, he's dead. Well, then why'd you give him a paralytic medication? Why do you have to paralyze a dead person, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just that they gave him too much. It's that on the insert, it says that it is not to be administered to those that have an electrolyte imbalance, because it can cause cardiac related issues. And what we saw is they gave it to him, and literally within a minute, all of a sudden his blood pressure was rapidly declining. And then the last thing that we see, and then there's an hour of black hole. There's no medical evidence at all for an hour and 5 minutes. But the last thing we see is a 30/20 blood pressure. And then that's it.
Mm.
And so 2019, we're discovering this, and the lawyers aren't willing to go down that road at all. They're like, no, this is an easy case to win. And we're like, that's what we thought the first time around. But then the judiciary showed themselves to be corrupt, and they ill-instructed the jury, so that the jury had no choice but to find us guilty. So not trusting the process.
Yeah.
So I finally just fired my lawyer, and then my wife's lawyer came to her and said, I can't work alongside David. I respect what he's doing, but I'm not going to be able to work alongside him in the courtroom. And so then she fired my wife as a client. And so now my wife is like just ticked with me, but I don't blame her, because she thinks we're going to jail now. And she's like, how can I represent myself? I'm like, I don't know. All I know is I'm supposed to represent myself. 2019 rolls around, lots of hearings leading up to it. And finally we get into the trial, and the trial ends up becoming 3 months long. Not solid, but it took it's actually 3.5 months of time to finally complete it, to the point where we heard the words "not guilty." And then they appeal. Then 2020 rolls around, and then June 11th, 2020. Now it's my birthday again, and we're in court again, right? For the third year in a row, we're in court on my birthday, and it's the appeal court, and they did a massive dirty on us this time. And so all this is taking place. So we're still right in the limelight.
Yeah.
And March of 2020 rolls around. So this is even before the appeal court happens. And I call COVID a hoax. And the media is stalking my Facebook page. So then a media article comes out with me calling it a hoax, right? They're trying to demonize me. And it backfires in their face. And then another media outlet does an article criticizing the other media outlet for doing an article on me, for even giving me a voice during this time. And then it went silent after that. No longer did the media give me a platform to talk about these issues surrounding the COVID hoax, the jabs and all that. Just went dead silent. So I'm surprised that they're actually giving Jeremy McKenzie a platform. I'm surprised that they're actually reporting on him, giving him attention.
Well, it's mainly to draw attention to like the far right extremist view. You know what that means, really, though, right? I mean, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, man, it's just crazy how much you can uncover, just the corruption, and you hope that there's a level. You hope the judiciary is at least favorable to those who seek true justice, but that just doesn't exist. It's like everything's corrupted, everything's tainted now. It's really sad to say, but that's the reality in which we live, right? It
is. And if you're going to do the right thing within the judiciary, I mean, we saw that with Justice Claxon, who was the trial judge in 2019, when he said the words "not guilty." When I looked at him, he got out of the courtroom pretty fast, even though the courtroom erupted in this uproar, like it was applause, right? Like it was big. But he got out of the courtroom pretty fast. I observed him, just the facial expression and stuff. And it's like he was wearing this really heavy weight. Like he was just this burden. And I'm pretty sure he knew what was about to happen to him for making that right decision, because all of a sudden he's a racist. He's prejudiced against, he's made a wrong ruling, set a wrong precedent. Like, he's being attacked on multiple levels, and it's going across Canada. The CMAJ, Canadian Medical Association Journal, an article is published in that, calling for or directing people to a petition to sign to have us retried, to have an appeal take place. Like, everybody's attacked, and they're attacking the judge and everything. Like, it's the whole thing just lit right up, and that judge got. What's that?
It's a circus, man.
Well, yeah. It was
crazy.
amazing to see all the different players. I'm like, wow, the Canadian Medical Association is on this too, huh? And they're sending out this article to their 70,000 subscribers, and so, anyways, yeah, he got lambasted. So in the judiciary, it's so incredibly corrupt, like corrupt to the core, that if you're one of the outliers, somebody who has a conscience, you're a judge working within the judiciary, you're going to get strung out. You're going to get hung out to dry if you make the right decision. So that's really the pressure that these people are finding themselves in, that are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, that's the sad reality that we live in, man. I wonder what kind of conversations take place behind the scenes with people that are in these positions of authority and power. Like, who's approaching them, who's threatening them and their kids and their livelihoods and their this and their that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, it's wild. It's wild. So, okay. Can I bring this individual up on screen here?
Yeah.
So who's this to you? How is he relevant in all this?
Well, okay. So 2014, we're in a preliminary hearing once again, June 2014. And he's the forensic pathologist that did the autopsy report on my son, and that left me, when I read the autopsy report, with way more questions than answers. They found overwhelming bacterial meningitis using what he referred to in the autopsy report as non-clinical research methodology. I'm like, what is that?
David, sorry, can I interrupt real quick?
Yep.
Just so the viewers are, they're seeing this right. It says the mug shot of the former Alberta medical examiner. Okay.
Yes. So
I didn't put that in. That's legit.
Yeah, right. That's exactly it. So yeah, okay. Thank you for clarifying that you're not, leading people to believe something that, anyways, that legitimately was the mugshot of Bamidele Adiagbo. So 2014, he's the one that introduces the whole concept of how Ezekiel's life would have been saved had he been vaccinated. Mm-hmm. 2016 rolls around, and he is frustrating Sean Buckley, our lawyer at the time, to no end. And we end up in court till 9. I think it's about 9:15 at night. Interestingly, he had scheduled the very next day that he's leaving the country. But now that's 2 times, because in 2014, the preliminary hearing was supposed to end after 1 week. But once again, Bamidele Adiagbo was scheduled to leave the country. So it had to be rescheduled. It took the first week of June, and then we continued on in July to finish off the preliminary hearing, because he was leaving the country the day after. I'm like, okay, this is getting a little strange. And then in 2019 now, I'm cross-examining him, and I'm cross-examining him for 5 days. But it was 5 days splayed out over a month and a half because of how dodgy he was. And they finally got him, because at this point in time in 2018, when we blew the whistle on the corruption in May of 2018, conveniently, he moved in June of 2018 down to Indiana. And so now he's working in Indiana, and now they finally are able to get him back in Canada for the trial, but he's now escorted by 2 regular clothed RCMP officers. Yeah. And so I'm cross-examining him for 5 days because he's so dodgy, and he refused to just simply answer questions. Once he realized that we were playing a game of chess. At first, he was willing to give me all sorts of stuff until he realized I entrapped him in a bunch of stuff and exposed some significant lies. So, so 2019 rolls, so now not guilty, whatever. But here's where it gets interesting. 2020 rolls around, and we have the appeal court make their decision finally on the hearing from June 2020. In March of 2021, they make their decision, and it's a really bad decision, and they turn it back for a third trial, which is almost unprecedented in Canada. They're now going at us again for a third trial. And everything's hinging on him, on his evidence, on Bamidele Adeyebo's evidence. Well, in May of 2020, he ended up under credential fraud investigation in both the state of Indiana and the state of Kansas. And under that stress, he goes and gets himself drunk a week after these investigations started up, and he rear ends some lady in his Mercedes, injuring her. She would eventually die like a year and a half later. And the family's suing him now for the complications, the untimely death due to complications from the initial injury. And so he's being sued. He ends up with a level 5 felony in the state of Indiana. If he's found guilty, it's a mandatory 1-year jail sentence. He ends up getting found guilty, and you think they threw him in jail for a year? No, they put him in for a couple of days, and then they gave him, I think it was a year of probation and some community service. So somehow he gets off the slap on his wrist, but he's under credential fraud investigation. And so all of this is starting to unravel from May 2020 to finally to the point that in June of 2021, now we're preparing for a third trial, and we're going to the Supreme Court of Canada at the same time. And so June 21st, 2021, he is scheduled for September for his own criminal proceedings.
Right.
June 22nd, the very next day, the Crown phones us and says that they're staying the charges. That's how everything came to a close. They tell the media that it's been 9 years since Ezekiel passed away and that the evidence has deteriorated, when in reality, the only thing that deteriorated was the credibility of their star witness who falsified my son's autopsy report.
Yeah. Isn't that is such a, like, what a spit in the face, man. Like that, like they can just stay, like, just, okay, we're going to drop it now. And like it should have played right through to see just the level of corruption that took place with all that.
Yep. And the media completely quiet on it, right? Like the most like imagine this, like this is what movies are made of.
I was going to say, you have a movie in the making here, man. I know you got a documentary, but this entire thing is a movie, man. It's like an Aaron Brockovich type of flick. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's crazy.
And with how it flips, like it's so unbelievable. Like all of a sudden this corruption is exposed, that this doctor may not actually be a doctor. He's under credential fraud investigation in 2 different states. He can't work on his own in the US because he failed his medical exams way too many times. You phone the number for his school in Nigeria, and it goes to some pub. He changed his name multiple times on his transcripts in what appears to be an attempt to get more attempts at failing his tests. Like there's so much. He says that he worked at some cancer center in his internship. They have no record of him ever being there. Like the whole thing it just blows up that this would have been the biggest part of the story, that wow, look at the twist on this. No, media silent, dead silent.
Of course.
Even the alternative media, dead silent. It was just shocking. It was just, people had no idea how it came to an end, and they had no idea that there was actually a nasty precedent set in the Alberta appeals courts, basically saying that vaccines are a necessary of life. And so that would have been extremely relevant in 2021 when it happened, and yet the media, alternative media, never touched it to alarm the Canadians, especially those that were resistant to the COVID shots, that, hey, look, there's actually a precedent here that could hold you criminally liable if you didn't get your child that COVID shot and they die from COVID after a false PCR result comes back saying that, your child did have COVID, even though there was no physical evidence of it, right?
Yeah, brother. So most of my audience might know, but I have a background in healthcare as well. I used to be a paramedic for probably about 6 or 7 years before I injured my back and had to transition out of it. But a lot of the intricacies regarding the medical side of this entire story, this narrative, that you've lived out and had to deal with was intriguing to me. You know, everything from the chain stokes to the hyperkalemia that Ezekiel was experiencing to all the, you know, the jabby jab related rhetoric. And, you know, it's wild, man. So when I transitioned out of the paramedicine field, I retrained to go back to school for a medical laboratory assistant. And so I worked in the labs for almost a year and a half, I would say, before they mandated that all healthcare workers get the jab. And so I said, no, not doing it. So that was the last time I stepped foot in that particular hospital. But while I was there, I got to learn about the PCR test and how high they cycle those things, how many times they cycle those things. And to the point where even the actual creator, Kerry Mullis, what he said before, you know, he mysteriously vanished, died after he told the world essentially that this PCR test isn't meant to diagnose, right? He's like, you can find anything in this thing. Old bacteria from 15, 20 years ago kicking around in your body. You can, if you cycle it enough, it'll find something. And so, like you're saying, these PCR tests were used and cycled so high in the laboratories to the point where they were creating cases, right? And so we would hear in the media, oh, 160 new cases today, or 300 new cases, and people equate cases with infection, right? And that's not the case.
Nobody's sick. Nobody's sick, yet you have all these cases. Yep.
Right. And so I was part of this. I was in the middle of you know, taking these swabs to the medical laboratory technologists and dropping it off and letting them do their stuff. And I'm finding out, and I'm driving home after work, and 190 new cases today. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I can't, like, this job is, I can't do this. And then eventually I just got forced out because they wanted us to get jabbed. So it's wild, man. The people that really don't know what's going on in the healthcare system. It is, not only is it completely just terrible and falling apart in our country, but it's corrupt, man. It is corrupt, and it's just it's used to support narratives, and like in your case with your son, and just like it's just crazy. It's crazy.
It is. I mean, that's really a Revelation 18:24 or 23, one of them, anyways. Issue right there, that all nations would be deceived by your sorceries.
Yeah.
That's where we're at, right? And obviously, I'm sure a lot of your audience is aware that the word sorceries comes from the Greek pharmakia, which means the administration of medications with an appeal to occult powers.
Yeah.
So
big pharma is the big god in the end, man.
Yep.
You know, people appeal to big pharma these days. It saves their lives. They'll do anything, right? Whatever big pharma says, they're going to do. That's going to be part of the end times deception, in my opinion. And it's already here.
Oh yeah. If the last 4 years hasn't highlighted that, I don't know what would.
Yeah. So David, there's another character. Okay, so I've called out a couple characters within, and I say that playfully because obviously I don't want to diminish the seriousness of what you've gone through here, man. But I mean, so Bamidele Adiagbo, did I say that right?
You did say it right. Good work.
Okay. He's one of the key antagonists here. We got quite a few antagonists, but there's this interesting, I would call him a protagonist within the narrative. His name's Bob Ray.
Yes.
So this was one of the most intriguing parts of the documentary for me, was this guy and the information that he uncovered regarding this supposed medical examiner. And just the documentary doesn't give us there's like a cliffhanger. It's like, where he's just gone. Like, you reached out to him. Lawyers reach out to people, have been reaching out to this guy in relation to what he's uncovered. So is he still missing? Is he gone? Like, what's the deal with him?
Yeah. Okay. So Bob Ray, first of all, was an angel in human form, if you will. I mean, he was entertaining
angel.
Well, he wasn't, but he played the role of one. He really did. He was on a mission and he was being led, and he really was a major catalyst for that hallelujah moment when it's like they're staying the charges, because the third trial didn't look like we could win it. because the appeal court had actually honed in on what evidence was relevant, omitting all this other evidence that we were relying on. And so we were looking at it and saying, it'll be nothing short of a miracle that we don't go to jail on this one. And all of a sudden, you've got Bob Ray behind the scenes through all of this for, over the past 2 years previous to that, building this case. And he's the one that actually discovered all of this evidence because his cousin's autopsy report had been falsified by Bamidele Adebayo, protecting potential criminals, right? Yeah. Guys found burned to death. His cousin's burned to death in a time that he should be celebrating, right? Like it doesn't make sense. So Bob Ray digs in, and he is relentless on his digging in. And he finds all this evidence that ultimately led to us not going to trial the third time. So he really did play a role, like a significant role, but then he disappears. And he disappears, is about a week, maybe 2 weeks after a news outlet called Fact Finder 12 in the US actually did an expose on Bamidele Adebayo. And they were the ones that actually reached out to I think it was the Fox Chase Cancer Center, asking, has Bamidele actually ever worked here? And they're like, we don't know who you're talking about, even though he's got it listed on numerous transcripts with slightly different dates, but showing that he's worked there on his medical transcripts. They had no recollection of him. So they actually reached out twice, and both times is, we don't know who you're talking about. We have no record, and we don't take internships. So this airs, and this is big. Like all of a sudden, Bamidele Adebayo is being exposed. A week or two later, Bobby Ray disappears. And he was always our informant as to what was going on with Bamidele Adebayo in relation to court proceedings, because it was actually really hard to follow anything on Bamidele Adebayo online. It just wasn't present. And the media wasn't highlighting any of it, including his court proceedings surrounding his drunk driving, rear-ending that lady. He couldn't find anything on his credential fraud investigation, nothing. It was like everything went silent. Wow. And so he disappears. And so I reached out to a few people to get in contact with him, and nobody could get in contact with him. And so this is January 2022. The documentary is beginning to be filmed in September of 2022. He's still gone. The documentary is finally put out in its first form as a docu-series called The Big Picture, as a 6-part docu-series in October of 2023. Bobby Ray still isn't anywhere to be found, that we're aware of anyways, at this point. And so by the time the documentary comes out, it's still this cliffhanger. Where's Bobby Ray? What happened to him? Well, in late 2023, he reemerges on some alternative media sources. And it turns out that he was concerned for his life in a similar nature to what took place with his cousin, because he was exposing some stuff and that would potentially put him in the crosshairs. And he goes to the RCMP with those concerns. And the RCMP, actually previous to this, had been instructed by the Crown to charge Bobby Ray with criminal harassment of Bamidele Adebayo, when the evidence just wasn't supportive of it. So he was supposed to bring in...
He was harassing him, right?
Exactly. And so here you've got this stack of evidence that, Bobby Ray has in his hands, and they're demanding that he brings all of that in to the police. They were saying, you need to come and surrender yourself. And so here you got this stack of evidence that he's compiled of all of the transcripts and stuff. And he's being told, you're going to be charged for criminal harassment. We're going to arrest you, but you need to bring in all of your evidence that you have on Bamidele Adebayo. And so he phoned me, and I instructed him, said, don't do it. I said, and you're going to want to consult with a lawyer on this, get a legal opinion on this. And the same thing, he went and consulted a lawyer, and the lawyer said, don't do it. Don't surrender yourself. And they never did come in and charge him. And this was February of 2021 that this began. So now, January of 2022, he's concerned for his life. He goes into the RCMP, and what do? They put him into a psych ward. and they told him he'd be in the psych ward for 2 years because they didn't have the legal standing to charge him criminally to get him to shut up. They put him into a psych ward and said, if you keep on talking about Bamidele Adebayo, you're going to be here for 2 years. Fortunately, Bobby Ray had a friend who's a lawyer that showed up after 6 months of Bobby Ray being in the psych ward. 6 months. Now, I work in the field of mental health. We've helped tens of thousands of people over the last 28 years come off of psychiatric medications. We know how the psych wards work. Yeah. We've helped people come out of the psych wards. Generally, when you get certified, you're there for 30 days, not 6 months, not 2 years. And Bobby Ray doesn't have a mental health condition that would ever qualify for him being certified. He's not, I wouldn't say he's normal, but who is normal? But, he's a bit of an eccentric person, but he is not mentally ill and certifiable. He's a quite intelligent individual, and he loves to expose the corruption now that he's on this mission. So yes, he wasn't dead, fortunately. But yeah, he was in a psych ward where they were holding him because of what he had exposed.
Wow. Okay. So for that was for 6 months. He's out, presumably.
He is. Okay. He's still showing. He's on alternative media sources. So I have yet to reach back out to him again, to get him back involved with all of this. And there's going to be some documentary producers that definitely want to interview him. To have him share his stories to what they did to him because he exposed Bamidele Adebayo.
He needs to go into protective custody, but police who aren't part of the system, you know what I mean?
In essence, he was put into protective custody to get him to shut up. The police put him in the psych ward.
Yeah, wow,
that's so twisted.
That is hard to hear, man. That you just growing up, you have no clue about the realities of this world, eh? Mm-hmm. It's just you just think that things are, fine and dandy. The government's there to love you and help you, and the police are there, and it's crazy, man. It really is, like how they can be used for political, gain, and it's just Okay, so I'm glad. I mean, that was one of the pressing questions I had after watching the documentary. I was like, where's Bob Ray? Like, what happened to him? Is there more to the story? Like, I hope he's okay. I hope he's not resting in Sheol. You know what I mean? From the powers that be. But yeah, okay. All right, but I had a few questions. Just unless is there more that you wanted to expound upon, or like I have a few questions just relating to some of the particulars. You've already covered quite a bit of the questions that I was going to ask already. Some of the content you've already talked about, so I won't be superfluous with that. But I want to know first and foremost, you went on a Canada-wide tour. Well, Canada, I should say, from the West Coast to Ottawa, right? That's as far kind of east as you went.
Yep.
How was that?
It was good. It was very good. We were able to connect with a lot of people. We did the tour with the launch of the documentary. So we were, some movie theaters we were in. We were in churches. We were in different halls. We were even in some guy's mechanic shop, and that was packed out in the middle of nowhere in Ontario, north of Toronto. We were in some guy's mechanic shop where we set up a projector and everything, and it was like plus 30 degrees and muggy, and it was a full house. And so anyways, it was good. What was disappointing about it, we were expecting to really gain a lot of momentum as time went on because there was so much opposition to making this happen. We were basically scheduled to be in every Cineplex across the country or any destination point that we were going to. And then all of a sudden we discovered, but their pricing was $2,800 per venue.
Oh,
now,
wow.
And that would seat anywhere from 100 to maximum 140 people. So imagine that. You get 100 people out, you got to charge them $30 just to break even, right? So it was not financially viable. And so we discovered those details right before we were about to head out. And we were left in this position, and I was kind of like in the backstage of everything, right? Of the planning of the tour. And then all of a sudden I ended up taking more of a role after that. But we're like, do we throw in the towel? Like, we're gonna have to push it off till the fall because you're not gonna do it midsummer. And we just came to the consensus, no, just move forward, even though we didn't have a lot of our venues booked and all that. But we figured, even though we're getting off on the wrong foot, things are going to build up. The momentum is definitely going to build up Todd Michael Harris, who is the producer of the documentary, also produced Uninformed Consent. He had great inroads with the alternative media because of that. And so he's like, we're going to get the media attention. We're going to be able to get this out there. People are going to come. Simple. No, didn't happen. My Facebook started to be really shadow banned, where instead of getting a few thousand views that I typically expect from a video, and that's a lower watch video, I was getting a few hundred views over the period of 2-3 days. I'm like, oh boy. So I'm getting like 1/10, if not less, of the exposure. And the alternative media refused to touch it. Not sure why. And here's where it gets interesting, because it's not like it's old dead news either. Health Canada just recently used the false narrative of my son Ezekiel to justify the new regulations that they're about to ram down our throats, that are ultimately going to prevent Canadians from having access to natural health products. So it's a relevant topic even today. It's newsworthy, but the alternative news, and when I say, I mean the established alternative news, the Rebel media and all that.
Rebel media, True North as well, probably.
They didn't touch it. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, nobody would touch it other than trying to think, like small independent, like that, that are independent, but any of the established alternative media wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And I'm not surprised, because Rebel News, with how prolific our case went, and it was big, like it was international headlines. There was people in Europe that were seeing it in their local papers, people in Australia that were contacting us because it was in their local papers. Like it was being pushed. This agenda was basically a Western world agenda that was being pushed, and we were being used. The death of our son was being exploited to push that agenda against natural health and to push vaccines. And so what's interesting about that is, in all of that, Rebel News only ever touched on us once. And they did so, I believe it was late April of 2016. And they used it. We'd just been found guilty, wrongfully convicted. They used that to do a smear article on us, and to basically encourage all of their audience to go get your children vaccinated. I remember looking at the article, and I remember going through all the comments, and I didn't see one positive comment towards their article. Their audience was livid that they had just published that article on us. And so that's the only article that I was ever aware of that Rebel News did on us. And so there's something strange there in relation to...
Rebel News is not who they make themselves out to be, in my opinion. Ezra's got some weird back history, and I don't know, like not to slander, but like it's frustrating, because they were one of the couple alternative media sources that I went to during the scandemic, right? Anyone that was anti-establishment news, I was like, I'm gonna listen to them, right? And so I was all about Rebel News, and then things started to get really weird. They wouldn't cover certain things on certain people, certain cases. Very, very Zionist stuff going on. Very, you know what I mean? I'm like, okay, I can't really trust these guys either, I don't think, but yeah, so that's frustrating, man, that alternative media didn't really pick up on you.
Yeah, so we never did get that momentum built up where we were selling out. But the fact of the matter is, because a lot of people just didn't know about it, and still don't. And so what was really beautiful, though, is that even though, sometimes there's only 25, 30 people that show up, and then there was other times that was, just over 100. But the response was phenomenal. Everybody who watched the documentary was visibly, impacted. And one of the really cool things about the documentary, and this has been reported back from others as well, that according to Todd Harris, it's the best crossover film that he's ever produced. And when he says that, he means to take people that are, believers in the system. They're statists. They believe that the medical system is good, that they're philanthropic, that they're there to serve humanity and all. It takes those people that have got this paradigm of everything's well, the government's doing great and whatever, even though it's getting hard to afford groceries. It takes those people and it opens their eyes in such a compelling way that they're now questioning everything, which is a beautiful thing. In fact, he did a sample test viewing with a group of teachers, right? So you imagine most of them are bought into the system,
Yep.
and it just shook him. He had people texting them, next day, the day after, whatever, just with these questions like, I can't believe this is happening in Canada. Wow, this is just phenomenal. Like, they're just really impacted because they just watched what they thought they would watch in a Hollywood movie that's, fiction, but they just watched it roll out in real life in Canada, and the facts are there to back it up.
Yeah, that's how I would have framed that, exactly what you just said, because when I watched it the first time too, again, when I saw the teaser for the first time over when you were on outside the camp, it gives you a good synopsis. It does. But then, of course, you start to break down the details and just the timeline of events and the different corrupt parties that get involved, and just you're left with your jaw on the ground. Like I struggle with my emotions watching it. Like I'm not an overly emotional guy. I was fighting back tears. There's part in it where your wife, when she was giving her testimony about how this entire ordeal was like imaginably was weighing on her, right? You've got the media slandering you guys and calling you out bad parents. You effectively could have saved Ezekiel if you did this and that and all that. You're dealing with the court. You're battling with the actual loss of your son. Like, there's so many elements wrapped up, so many emotions. I can't even imagine. Honestly, I can't imagine how you guys have the strength to pull through. Which is why I highly recommend people watch this documentary, because it'll provide you with hope that Yahweh can give people courage and strength and the fortitude and ability through the worst loss, like a Job, right? And still come out the way you guys have come out. And so it's crazy, man. So it's a tearjerker. Yeah, go ahead, man.
Well, it's beautiful. And I'm glad that you're segueing into really, I think, in my opinion, the most important part of this conversation. I mean, there's so much that we can do to empower ourselves to be able to navigate through the storms of life. And, one of those things, and I'm not here to put a plug in for it, but is, making sure that our bodies are nourished, right? That they're there to serve us, right? To treat it like a temple. And that's really the line of business I'm in. But there's a whole other element to this, which is interesting, because it's actually, that's an answer to prayer, right? There's a whole other story as to how that was discovered. And it was really just a blessing from the Most High that restored my family first. And then, so we're talking about the physical element of it, but really when we're looking at all of this, the Most High, he carried us through. Like, there's no doubt about it. Like, it's not even a debate in our home. It's not like, well, no, like, there were so many players that were brought in to, provide deliverance in one way or another. My brother and his team were one. My brother just sacrificed so much, and including his health. Like, to what he did, it had a negative impact on him. He had to go through the autopsy photos and everything, stuff that I couldn't stomach. And he made some discoveries with the team. But there was people like that were feeling driven to do this, Bobby Ray included. But after my son passed away, you brought up Job. The moral of the story is that we ought not just to be, looking at the Bible, perhaps, like, in that sense. That, I mean, we need to really feast on it in a sense, but we need to be making sure that we're hearing his voice and that he's leading us. Because it was right after the passing of my son, I just felt driven. I need to go. I'm just going to go for a walk into the mountains. I'm taking a backpack, not even taking food. I've got water. I'm just going up there, and I don't know how long I'm going to be there. And take the Bible, take the my journal, which I didn't write and I should have, but I ended up feeling driven to read Job. Like, this is in the month following the passing of Ezekiel. So I read the whole book of Job while I'm sitting in this tent while it's pouring out, and I'm the only one up on this, up in these mountains, whatever, and just having that time, right, of reflection, meditation, and had no idea, first of all, the story of Job had so much more relevance to me at that point in time, but had no idea how relevant it would actually become in my life. But it was really a beautiful thing to have that context, imprinted into me before the criminal charges, before the persecution, before losing ourselves financially, socially, all this type of stuff. Like, we'd already lost our son, but now every other aspect of our life is just being deteriorated in front of our eyes as we're going through this hardship. And now we have context, though. So it's not just like, well, this sucks, right? It was, I knew the struggle was necessary, that we had to go through that, and that was already given to us. But what else was really cool is that leading up into the first trial, so late 2015, in the Mormon Church, we don't put a whole lot of weight on the Psalms. It's not something we study. It's not something that you hear being read over the pulpit. It's not there, right? Like, if you never read the Bible for yourself as a Mormon, you might not even know the Psalms exist. Like, that's how, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't grow up with the Psalms being, a big part of my life. But I'm doing my own searching, I'm doing my own studying now, and all that type of stuff outside of where we're being focused in on myopically within Mormonism. And Psalm 18 all of a sudden just takes life, and it's beyond just like, oh, this sounds really great, and it had substance, and it became so thematic in my life. In just the first 3 verses, and so I've actually got that right now, right?
Yeah, pull it up, man.
Yeah, so Yahweh is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my El, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon Yahweh, who is worthy to be praised, and am saved from my enemies.
Amen.
It was prophetic. And then I had other people sharing psalms and stuff like that as we were going through these battles. And what was really cool, like, some of them were saying, this is for you. I felt driven to share this with you. And once again, prophetic, deliverance from our enemies, how they would turn and flee. And they did. The whole thing, like, it was just so beautiful. And so really, when you
hallelujah.
God. Yep, 100%. And so when people watch the documentary, I didn't have any of the say in relation to how it was actually created. I was interviewed, my wife was interviewed, other people were interviewed, and then I saw the finished product, right? So I had no creative control. So what you don't get a whole lot of in there is about that whole element of the journey, right? About the fact that there is a hallelujah in all of this, that he is to be praised. You don't get that from the documentary. So when people watch the film, just know that deliverance, all of it, the fact that it turned for good, that everything, it's all because we were delivered. And when I reflect back on that, and I wrote an article on this, I've done some kind of anti-Christmas articles over the past years, and it really stirs people up. I mean, they have such an emotional attachment to it. So it's like you're challenging their very identity, and it's it. And so I felt driven one year to do something different, and it was to actually just share my testimony, which was kind of tied into Christmas, but why we don't observe Christmas and how we were eventually drawn out of that. But I threaded in as well in relation to our actual journey of going to jail, being delivered, all that type of stuff, and how there's a pattern in my life that if you were to look at all the different events, and if you were taking a look at my personal life and what was going on in my personal life directly correlates to what was happening in the public arena, right? In relation to the losing battles, in relation to the winning of battles. And there is something there where you can take a look at it. And if you knew everything that was going on, in my heart, in my mind, everything, that there is a direct correlation in relation to walking in obedience to his will, exercising faith in him, and being delivered.
Amen.
Absolutely there.
Yeah. If you're doing the will of the Father, even in the midst of trials and tribulations, he will guide you through.
Yep.
His Spirit will bring it. Yeah.
Miraculous deliverance, and that's what we saw. But when I backslid, when I deviated, when I wasn't exercising faith in him, it didn't turn out so well.
Yeah.
So there's a direct correlation there. And so I threaded that into the whole story about, hey, look, I know we all love Christmas, right? We all have our emotional attachments to it. We all have we can relate with it in our past, grandparents, parents, all that type of stuff. And especially if we've lost a loved one, it's like now that's our connection to them. And no, when we separate ourselves from the ways of Babylon, when we separate ourselves from all of this, and we actually just exercise faith in him, saying, I don't know what it's going to look like, and it might feel a little empty at first, but he fills that void, and he wants to bless us with so much more, and he ultimately wants to bless us with deliverance to be able to come out of Babylon but that comes through obedience to his will.
Amen. Yeah, I don't mean to take a tangent here, but I found that when I first started coming to this new understanding of faith and what it meant to follow Yahweh and keep his commandments, I was militant about Christmas and Easter are all pagan, and always faithfully making those posts every year for like a good 5 years, I would say. And then eventually I was like, all right, I need to change my tactic here, because I through my zeal, I wasn't seeing that I was potentially hurting friends and family, offending them.
Drawing a battle line.
Yeah, drawing a battle line. I was like, you know what? I'm going to change tactics here. I'm going to glorify and highlight the feast days, the feasts, the Sabbaths, the other holidays, the holy days that Yahweh, wants us to be celebrating, in my opinion, as covenant keepers. And so through that venture, I think people, as they continue to ask questions, this has been my experience. They ask questions, and why are you keeping those? And the interactions become a little more personable, as opposed to just like, Christmas is pagan, stop celebrating Christmas. Didn't you know it's pagan? You guys are all Christians, and that just, it didn't work, is what I'm saying. And so I see it's funny, because I've been in this walk, this walk. When I say this, it's this Hebrew roots, if you want to call it that, Torah keeping, commandment keeping, whatever, walk for about just over 10 years now. It's probably about 11 years. And it's funny how things morph and transition as from when I started from day one. And I see that a lot of people who come into this faith similarly do the same thing. They go right to don't keep Christmas and it's pagan, and they harp on this and then they see, wait a minute, like through this zeal, I'm actually turning people away and off. So it's like, my recommendation to folks is, just think about the negative effects that zeal can possibly have, because I have experienced it. I've had those condemning conversations with folks like, you call yourself a Christian, come on, like you do better, like can't you see what I'm seeing? You said myopic earlier. It was a myopic perspective of how I approached other believers and just people in general with this new understanding of my faith, and it wasn't working properly. So
no,
but no, it's good. And sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, just to go and coincide with what you're saying there, it doesn't often work out well to attack something or to show what you stand against, compared to highlighting what you stand for.
Exactly.
So taking that positive approach and really leading, right? Like, hey, what's the solution? Ultimately, the solution is, let's keep the feast. Whereas, and if you highlight that and show the joy in it, and we found so much joy in it, in keeping the feast, there is no void. There is no, we ditched Christmas, we ditched Easter, and we ditched Halloween way before that. Yeah. And now we're just left with this void of like, we're just pretty stale people. No. There is way more joy. There's way more celebration going on in our family. It's more fun. And so if we were to focus in on that, then it's not like we're inviting people to jump out of what they're doing into the black hole of who knows what it is for them, because they have no idea. Invite them to keep the feast and see where that goes. And I think it's easier to then, once they recognize that, hey, what 100%. Is the purpose? What is Easter? What does the word Easter even mean, right? What does the word Christmas mean? Also, you start questioning everything, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the replacement is the upgrade. So they'll start to know that as they're pressing in, and you know what I mean. You don't have to force feed them this pagan, the pagan police type stuff, like going around. That's pagan. They'll get there when you feed them the good, nourishing word of God in its simplicity, and in that manner, I feel like people will bite into that. And they have been. That's been my experience. They bite into it, and then they start saying, oh yeah, okay, so if this is true, then what is this stuff? And then they start questioning, then they start going down that trail, right? And it's been my experience that that's just a better way to go about it. But okay, brother, a few more. I don't know how much time you've got. I know we're a 3-hour difference. What is it, about 6 o'clock your time? Are you getting hungry?
I'm getting hungry, but I've got time. Hey, this is good. If we can share truth that ultimately blesses people, I'm for it.
Okay. I wanted to touch on your father real quick. Anthony, let me pull him up here. So this guy, He so he's the founder, right, of Truehope?
Yeah, so ultimately what happened in 1995, November 1995, he was walking down a hallway one day with his colleague. He was a property manager actually over 26 of the Mormon churches in southern Alberta. He'd obtained that contract, and he's talking about replacing carpets, and he ended up feeling driven, because this is in the height of, like, our family is falling apart from mental illness. My mother had taken her life a year and a half before. My grandfather had taken his life 16 and a half years before that. And two of my siblings were on meds, and my one older sister was in and out of the psych ward on a regular basis. So what happened is he's been, at this point in time, praying for the better part of like half a year, fasting and praying and just petitioning the Most High for an answer, just saying, like, there's got to be a better answer. The medications aren't working. And as he's walking down the hallway one day, he feels driven to tell the story of what's going on at home. And so that was what ultimately led to him receiving the answer that these vitamins and minerals in their proper form would be the answer to correcting mental health issues. And that's when he became a co-founder. So he's a co-founder, and then the other individual, David Hardy, would also become a business partner of his for the better part of like 15 years. Oh, I think I lost you there, Brother Ken.
Brother, can you hear me?
Oh, good. You're back. You are back. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's never happened to me. That's never happened. It just randomly booted me off.
Yes,
Okay,
I just told the story about how his prayers were answered, and as he's walking down the hallway one day, he told his colleague about what was happening, and his colleague had something interesting to say. He said, I've worked in the animal feed industry for 20 years, formulating feed for hogs in Western Canada, Western States, and we would correct a condition called ear and tail biting syndrome, where they get irritable with each other and get violent. He says we could just put the proper nutrition to their feed, and they would get rid of the situation. And so then the two of them joined up, and so that's how my father became a co-founder in the development of the Empower Plus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So he's obviously a relevant player with regards to how you guys ended up in court and all that stuff after Ezekiel's passing, right? I mean, I don't know if we didn't mention this. I mean, it's in the documentary, but they had you flagged, right? Your family, like, big time.
Yeah, there's a 15-year backstory to us battling the government, and it actually started in 1997 with Revenue Canada, with my father. My father actually incited change and legislation to be developed called the Taxpayers Protection Act back in the late 90s, due to the government involving themselves in our lives. And actually they were one of the causal factors. They'd caused such a stressful situation for our family that that was actually what led to my mother going in 1994 to get a prescription for Prozac, because she was so stressed and depressed from what Revenue Canada had done to us unlawfully and financially. And so when she took her life, she actually wrote that up in the suicide note, saying pay off Revenue Canada with insurance money, instructing my dad to do so.
Wow.
So that was one of the causal factors. Now, fast forward 3 years, and Revenue Canada comes back into my dad's life with a reassessment on my deceased mother. Right. So now they're looking for more taxes, even though, right. And my dad's like, no, we're not doing this. And so he went big, and it ended up national radio shows, all sorts of stuff. And Revenue Canada got a major black eye over it. And it resulted in the Taxpayer Protection Act being drafted up. So that was the battle won. And then literally it was like a year later, the first study came out on Empower Plus, showing it to be over 3 times more effective than antidepressants. That study comes out, it goes on to national news. Health Canada comes in the next day. My dad tries to work with them. He sees they have an agenda that they just want him gone out of Canada. This is not to be accessible to Canadians. And so he just outright disobeyed them and continued to make sure that other families were gaining access to it as well, so that they could receive the same blessing that we did. And finally, Health Canada came in with an RCMP SWAT team and raided us, and became big rigmarole, ended up in court. My father was charged criminally for supplying the vitamins and minerals to people with mental illness, and he ended up winning. and that ended up looking really bad for the government again.
Wow.
And so that's in 2005, 2006. So then there's more battles in between there as well, regulatory battles that we were fighting, making sure that Canadians had access to natural health products. And so we were constantly on the radar with the government for the better part of 15 years.
They're
And
keeping
then
a close eye on you and anyone associated.
yeah, so when we end up in the hospital with Ezekiel, the social workers and the police already had a black box warning about us. We were flagged. We were flagged actually as sovereign citizens, and that there was a warning there that we could be heavily armed and not potentially dangerous, but that using force and stuff like that. So it was interesting right off the bat, and which makes sense as to why all of a sudden there's 6 armed officers in the Alberta Children's Hospital watching us. And we're like, oh, junk, I'm getting arrested. Why? Why are we getting arrested? What do we do? So, yeah, the whole thing, there's a major backstory as to why they came after us, thinking that they could exploit the death of my son through falsifying the autopsy report, but also take down or go at at our family again, because we'd already won twice against them, or actually more than twice, but 2 very notable wins in the public eye.
Wow. Okay. Let me ask you just a couple more questions there, brother. I have quite a few. I don't want to keep you too much longer though. So like, how did you end up with Sean Buckley as your attorney? Because he seemed like quite the rock star.
Yeah, he's quite the rock star. His journey actually has been paralleled with ours, and we've back and forth for years, since 2003. He ended up becoming our lawyer for Truehope to represent us with the first court case that we ended up winning. He then became quite an advocate for natural health products in Canada, and that's what he's really well known for right now, as well as his work with the NCI, going across Canada and doing the whole NCI in relation to what COVID and the COVID shots have done to people. And so, but his journey really started with us. So we've kind of paralleled, like it's been interesting.
Gotcha.
So then in 2008, he alerted us to what was going on regulatory wise, that Health Canada was looking to get this, legislation through. So then we started the Stop C51 campaign. At the same time, he started NHPPA, the Natural Health Product Protection Association. We helped co-found that, but we have got nothing to do with it now. And so he heads that up today. But then when 2013 rolled around and we were charged, we were working with 2 lawyers, and we were concerned. We were concerned that we were actually going to get good representation, because you wanted lawyers that were actually ideologically on your side, because this was going to be an interesting case. And so we fired those 2 lawyers and we hired Sean Buckley. So that's how he kind of reemerged back into our life. And then, he represented us through till 2016. And then he said he was going into retirement. He didn't, but he kind of did for a bit. And I think what it was is that court case, because you hear at the end of the trailer, he says, this is tied for the dirtiest case I've ever dealt with in my life.
Yeah.
Well, we saw what happened to him in the first dirtiest case that he dealt with, because it was actually the Truehope court case that he had dealt with that was the most dirty. When we sued Health Canada, we sued them after they lost the charges against us. We sued them for what they did to the Canadian public, because they actually caused deaths from what their actions were in preventing people from having access to the Empire Plus, and caused people to suicide. And they were warned about it, and they knew that what was going to happen, and they continued on with it. So we were now suing them on behalf of the Canadian public. And that case was so incredibly dirty in how Health Canada was protected against their criminal actions that resulted in death. And so after we lost that, Sean Buckley really struggled for some time with that. And so I figured that he probably went through the same thing in 2016 when he said he was going to retire, because he had just gone through another court case that was just absolutely corrupt to the core, and the judiciary was in on making sure that it went in a certain direction. And so, but yeah, so yeah, he's a bit of a rock star. He's quite well known. So we just keep on. It's funny, like if we part ways for a couple of years, some events will bring us back together again. So we're actually working with him again, in relation to the whole regulations that are going on in Canada, because Health Canada has come in and they're already trying to come down on us, and they made us remove the 35 medical journal publications off of our website showing what Empower Plus will do for anxiety and depression and autism and psychosis.
Really?
Yeah, so they came in and said, you can't have those studies on there. And we're like, they're not our studies. These are coming from independent universities from around the world that we haven't funded this research. Like, we're just sharing what they found. And they're like, nope, you can't have that on your website. So,
So that was going to be one of my questions. Has Health Canada relaxed their corrupt hand against you guys, or are they continuing to be a
they did for a bit. They did for a bit. We have all of these products are licensed by them. We had to fight tooth and nail to get the Empower Plus license. Don't get me wrong, because they didn't want it available in the country, but they just had no standing to deny access to it. So they finally let it in and gave it a license. But it was relaxed for a bit there. But since October of 2022, they've reared their ugly head again, and we battled with them into June of 2023, where we finally complied with them, but we did so in a bit of an unorthodox way. So if you were to go to our website, truehopecanada.com, you're going to see my face right off the bat on a video where I'm highlighting why certain material isn't available on our website and why censorship is nothing new.
That's so frustrating, man. Doesn't surprise me though. Okay,
Yeah.
so AHS, the first time I actually heard about Alberta Health Services was through, Arthur Pawlowski.
Yep.
Have you guys met? Have you interacted at all?
Yeah, a couple of times. Yep.
I love that man. So his viral video, right? Get out, Nazis! Get out!
Yeah. Gestapo.
Yeah, you Gestapo, get out. Yeah, that was where I learned about just the corruption of AHS and who they are and what they represent. And so when I saw that kind of mingling into your documentary and your life, I was like, oh gosh, okay, that makes perfect sense to me. Okay, what else? So some of the more practical questions, like I'm wondering, like, through this documentary, how is your marriage? I mean, like, obviously you don't need to get any details, obviously, but just the craziness of everything you've had to deal with, like during and then post. Like, what does Colette display the same courage and tenacity and, like, you know what I mean? Like, where's she at? Like,
she didn't always. Don't get me wrong. I had a profound experience. I won't go into too much detail. Just kind of not sugarcoat it, but I'll just kind of glaze over it. I had a very profound experience 3 weeks before Ezekiel passed that ultimately provided me an anchor to get through all of this, where my faith was unquestionable, right? In that sense, don't get me wrong. I had a lot of questions, and it lacked a lot of understanding, but there was just some things in my life that were undeniable, and that helped carry me through. She didn't have that experience that I had been blessed with literally 3 weeks before he passed. And so she went through some serious struggles. She went through some major faith crisis, and all that, over all this, questioning the very existence of a God, right? That type of thing.
Yeah.
She went through that. And I had to learn to be very patient and just be compassionate, which is not really necessarily my nature. I'm not an emotional guy. I'm very black and white. Logical is just kind of how I'm wired. So it was hard for me to kind of tap into that and not just try to explain it away for her and try to just help her through it. Like, no, I just had to be patient. And so she went through some serious struggles. And it's interesting that you asked this question. I'm glad that you did. Because it's a good one. One of the last questions I was asked on a podcast that I did back in the beginning of July was, "Are you still married?" Right?
Yeah.
And then the guy prefaced before I got to answer. He said, "Because statistically speaking, within 2 to 3 years after even just the death of a child, most people will divorce." And I can see why that would be, because oftentimes, we love to play the blame game, and that's, this is an important lesson. Neither my wife nor I played the blame game. We just didn't. We both lacked understanding, but it's within our nature to oftentimes point fingers. As soon as that happens, it's done, or quite often it can be done. So fortunately, we never went through that. Never did we hold one account and say, had you done this, he would have died or whatever.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Maybe we had our thoughts and like, well, what if this or what, right? But you question everything.
Yeah.
There's so many would have, could have, should have after somebody passes, and you just say, well, if I had only done this, right? Like, it doesn't matter how they pass away. There's always if only I'd done this, maybe it would have turned out different, right?
Mm.
So we never pointed the finger at each other, but we weren't always on the same page. But patience is a beautiful thing. She has been a tremendous help through all of this. Even in her questioning her faith, she maintained the essence of who she is, which is just a beautiful support. And really, like, I don't know how I would have got through it without her playing the role that she did. Although he will always, buoy us up. I'm just glad that she did play the role that she did, because even though she had some serious struggles and there was some crisis at times, we got through, and she is amazing. And I don't think there's any residual trauma left over from any of the events now. And our marriage is much better than it's ever been. Like, it's amazing. It gets better and better and better slowly, but we're moving in the right direction. It's just better and better. That when I look at our marriage today compared to our first year of marriage, or our third year of marriage, or 6 year, it's just so much better.
The trajectory looks good.
Absolutely. We're moving in the right direction, and it's great as it is, don't get me wrong, but I anticipate that it could even just continue to get better and better as time goes on, as we become more refined, right?
That's amazing. That blesses me to hear that, and it gives me hope for my own marriage. Come trial and tribulation, that we, stay solidified in our mutual faith and all that stuff. So that's awesome to hear, man. Because I was wondering, you wonder as you're watching this documentary, it's like, how, it had to be supernatural comforting, a supernatural intervention of sorts to be able to get people like you guys through just everything that took place. And so it truly does bless me to hear that, man.
100%. Yeah, we just celebrated our 20th anniversary. Actually, at the time that I was asked that question on the podcast, me and her were on a little vacation for 3 days out into the mountains in BC, celebrating our 20th anniversary. So it's kind of funny when they ask, "Are you still married?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary right now."
That's awesome. So just in relation to your current, I guess, position within the company, you had asserted that you were slated to become one of the top health speakers across Canada before all these wild circumstances took place?
Yeah, well, yeah. So actually,
field?
Sorry, what's that?
Are you still, like, I mean, I know you're VP, but is that role still something that you attain to, or is that no?
No. So COVID obviously changed that. Health shows have never been the same, but also there's another element to this as well, that we've dealt with our fair share of pharmaceutical trolls over the years, going back just to the year 2000 when the first study came out. But those pharmaceutical trolls are still alive and well. So anytime that I go to do a public presentation, oftentimes they will find out about it. We don't even advertise anymore online, because as soon as we do, it's going to get shut down, because they create this big false rigmarole online, making it look like there's a bunch of people opposed to it when there actually isn't. If they don't find out about it, the public presentations go really well, have a great turnout, good audience. They're very receptive. They love it. And so it's always good. But once one of these pharmaceutical trolls finds out about it, which is interesting because it appears there's feet on the ground. Because I actually had a cancellation this past spring where there was a poster up in a store, and all of a sudden a picture of that poster ended up online from somebody who put it on Reddit, and all of a sudden there's all these comments, and it looked like literally the same person responding to themselves under a different alias, and made it look like a big ordeal. Thing gets shut down, everything goes quiet immediately, right? No residual, I'm not going to shop at that store anymore. Everything shuts down as soon as they obtain their objective. So I don't do a whole lot of public presentation anymore. But I did a significant amount. In fact, it was to the point that 3 out of 4 weekends every month, or not every month, but from October through to early December, and then late January to early April is when the hot time is for health shows. I was doing presentations 3 out of 4 weekends in the month, because, well, the fourth one is always shut down because it's a long weekend. There's one long weekend per month in essence. And so anyways, I was that busy. And then in between, I would be doing all these public presentations, seminars at the health food stores. And all of that came to a close as soon as the media figured out how to get me canceled, because the media was actually the ones responsible for making it happen. Even after I was wrongfully convicted, I did a bunch of public presentations, no issues until the media started to stalk where I was going. And then they would publish articles in the local paper, basically saying that this health food store or this health show is hosting a baby killer. They wouldn't say it in those words, but by the time you're done reading it, that's exactly what you would derive from their article. And so they were doing that and basically creating this AstroTurf movement against me to basically prevent people from hearing about what proper vitamins and minerals can do for your mental health and how you don't need psychiatric medications.
Wild. So you'd mentioned just the toll that this whole ordeal has taken on your lives. One of them being financial toll. Have you guys been recompensed in any way? Is there any remuneration, any lawsuit? Like, it seems like you've got a killer case to, like, they ruined your lives for years. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
so
is there anything in the works, or is there?
No, there isn't. So in 2019, we had a lot of grounds after we, that court case there, the second trial, and we heard not guilty. Our next action was going to be to sue a lot of these different government agencies, and it was going to be big. Like, we're talking in the millions, if not tens of millions. Like, it was going to be big. And then they appealed, and now everything's pending the appeal, right? Because the outcome of the appeal is going to dictate whether or not you have grounds. And that appeal, interestingly, the decision that was rendered seemed to conveniently close every door that we had for a lawsuit. Yep. And then, so that's one of the reasons that we took it to the Supreme Court, was to get the law rectified, to get that vaccine precedent scrubbed, but also to undo the lies from the Alberta Appeals Court, to reopen those doors so that we could hold these people accountable. And the Supreme Court finally, after having it for a year and a half, in August of 2022, rejected our case, leaving that vaccine precedent there, preventing us from suing. So the whole thing came to a close. And the only real hope at this point in time that I'm aware of would be if Bamidele Adiabo, if he was discovered to actually not be a real doctor, we would have huge grounds for lawsuits. But the problem is they'll never find him as that, because the credential fraud investigation for both Indiana and the state of Kansas, they would find themselves liable for tens of millions of dollars of lawsuits for having him employed as a doctor when he wasn't.
They just don't want to deal with that.
Nope. Because and Alberta, same thing.
Sick.
Yeah,
sick,
so
man.
everything's gone quiet. Everything's gone eerily quiet on the matter.
You will be so rich in the kingdom, my friend.
Well, let me put it this way right now. I don't lack anything. Yeah, we went through tough times. Yeah, first of all, we had a lot of support. A lot of people, like, there was about $350,000 of our court fees were fundraised. Don't get me wrong, though. Our court fees and everything all were over $1 million by the time everything was said and done. And then I said, I'm self-representing. I don't have $500,000. So yeah, we had to sell a lot of stuff. We had to live very frugally. At one point in time, we were living in an old barracks home that was 1,000 square feet with 4 kids and 1 bathroom. We were living very frugally, and it was a beautiful experience. I look back at the whole of it and say, wow, that was awesome. Like, living in this small cabin thing that the
You're
walls,
a trooper, man.
So, we made the best of it. And so we went through all this. We had to sell, different possessions and stuff like quads and all that. We had to sell it. Right. But when I look back and I say, well, first of all, what a blessing to go through that hard time and to learn to be better with our money. And second of all, when I look at it, we've been tremendously blessed since all of this, that we are really prospered. In fact, I sometimes have to, slap myself in the face and say, why am I complaining over the fact that I can't handle all of the opportunities that are finding themselves on my doorstep? Why am I complaining about that? Like, I'm receiving more opportunities and blessings than I can handle, and I'm complaining about it. And we've been really blessed. There's no doubt about it. So it's,
Good.
have we been recompensed by the government, and have they been held accountable? No.
It's dirty money anyways. Yeah.
Exactly. But are we thriving in our situation, and do we have any reason to complain? Absolutely no reason to complain. And yes, we are thriving.
That's good. It's taxpayer money anyways. It would be anyways, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Dirty money. Exactly. Who am I to take someone else's money? I mean, that's just legalized.
Rob Peter to pay Paul. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're right. I appreciate that sentiment, because that's an important sentiment. I don't take government handouts for anything, because I don't believe in legalized theft. Who am I to take from somebody else who had that money ripped from them, right?
Brother, you're awesome. I've got a bunch of other questions I was going to ask you. We've already gone 2.5 hours. It's supper time where you're at. My wife just got home from work, and I miss her, so I'm going to see her. But this has been great. I love you, man. You're a brother in the faith. You're just full of courage, strength, the long suffering that you've exuded. Clearly, it's inspiring to me. Honestly, I'm not just saying that. It truly is inspiring to me. So it's great to see that there's another brother on this plot of land that we call Canada, who loves Yahweh with all his heart, and is actually walking the walk, and it's truly inspiring to me. So I love you, man. I'd love to have you on again. Was talking about some theological stuff. I appreciate all your transparency and openness this evening, and hopefully people are gonna go watch this documentary, because it's wild, it's eye-opening. But at the end of the day, David, we know who wins, right? We know that God's kingdom is coming. We're gonna have the perfect system on this earth. It's gonna be, a system that has the best judge ever. Right? We won't have to worry about the tyrants anymore. We won't have to worry about corruption and lies and media slandering and all this ridiculous stuff that we have to face in our day and age. So, but through it all, you hold a very good attitude. It's something to want to mimic, honestly. So I thank you for that, brother. I pray that you and your family continue to be blessed. And thank you for the documentary. Thank you for all the work that went into it all. Everyone that was a part of it. It's, again, encouraging. It's sad. It's a range of emotions, but at the end of the day, it just shows us where we're at in this world and how much we need Yeshua to come. So if anything, that's what I got out of it. We need his kingdom to come. We need our king to make all things right. So
yep, definitely looking forward to it. And that's what the hard times do, is they oftentimes get us looking in the right direction, where we actually have a desire for his kingdom.
Awesome. I love you, brother. Is there anything you want to plug? Any media stuff or websites besides the one that I have in the link for the actual documentary?
I don't think so. I know I mentioned truehopecanada.com if because you get an idea as to what Health Canada is doing at that point in time, but also, but aside from that, no, I think everything's good.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks again. I appreciate you so much for coming on. It was awesome. It was such a blessing.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Ken. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, brother. Okay, we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me this evening. That was Brother David Stephan. He's awesome, as you can see. If you guys joined partway through or halfway through or whatever, I recommend you watch this one from the beginning, because it's a fascinating one. Brother David has gone through a lot, him and his family, and you'll see it all at great length and in detail on the documentary. So please look at the link in the video description. Click on it, guys. I'm seeing people ask, how do we find the documentary? Go to the video link that's in the description box underneath. Just underneath. Scroll down right in the description, and it's posted there, guys. And if you can't find that, just go to bigpicturemovie.com and you'll find it there. I just want to say thank you to Sister Marcia for your gifted 10 hanging on his words memberships. She's always faithful with the membership, so I appreciate you, sister, so much for that. And thank you for joining us this evening, guys. It was a blessing. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were encouraged by the testimony, by this man's willingness to kind of expose everything that he's gone through. It's a very detailed, intricate part of his life. It was a big part of his life. He's still a young man. He said he's in his early 40s, and just the stuff that he went through, it's wild. It really, truly is wild. So I hope that you can take an introspective look at your own life and hopefully gain some sort of a taste of what it would be like to go through trials and tribulations in your own lives. And remember that there are brothers out there and sisters in this world, not just in North America, all over the world, who go through things and are persecuted for the faith that they hold in Yeshua, and for their beliefs, even outside of the faith in Yeshua, just with regards to bodily autonomy and making decisions that go up against corrupt narratives and corrupt governments and mandates. So I hope that you're encouraged by this. I hope you're blessed. And again, guys, I thank you for joining. If you liked this, if you found this valuable, please hit the like button. Do comment on the actual video itself. Just get the algorithms moving a little bit for us, guys. Share it with your friends, family. Ultimately, I want you to go see the actual documentary, please. If the things that David talked about this evening intrigued you and you find it fascinating and want to go see the actual full-length version of the things we were discussing tonight, check that out. That said, I think that'll be it. I think I'll sign off, guys. I'm sorry for not being so active lately. Life's a little hectic. I'm sure you guys can empathize, but I do plan on coming back a little bit more with some more live streams, some more regular videos here at Hanging on His Words. Always in the works, always working on something. Hopefully I'll even get Brother David back on. We definitely agree on a lot of theological things. And so I'd like to, discuss certain parts of those theological agreements that we have. And so, or even disagreements, doesn't matter. He's a good brother. I think we'll have him on again. But all that said, Yahweh bless you. Continue hanging on His words, and keep your eyes on the prize, which is the hope of our faith, the kingdom to come, resurrected body, which my brother David and his wife Colette will one day see their son Ezekiel in, which is amazing to think about. That's part of the amazing story of the gospel news of God's kingdom, is that we're going to get to see family. We're going to get to see people who've passed on and who are resting, waiting for the resurrection. And so, David, I know you're backstage right now, brother, but I wanted to say that, and just I know you're looking forward to the resurrection too. That's part of your belief, part of your hope in the Father and His Son, and that you'll be reunited with your son Ezekiel one day too in the glory. So, okay, guys, love you, and we will talk soon. Continue hanging on His words. Shalom.